Hi, I'm Kunal. I'm a staff interaction designer at Google. Design is a passion area of mine. I didn't come in with a background in this, and so I empathize with a lot of developers and other people around the world who want to create really nice looking, high quality apps, but don't know where to get started. I didn't really know what I wanted to do when I grew up. My parents really wanted me to go down the doctor or engineer or lawyer path, but I was always into art. I never had time growing up to really focus on those classes amongst my other studies. But I developed this passion for mechanical drawing, of all things. My high school had a class in it, and so that was kind of really my interest to design and really problem solving through design. And that's something that really stuck with me. So I decided to study architecture, and in going through that program, I kind of picked up doing web design on the side and found that that was really something I was more interested in than the architecture work I was doing during the day. Design has kind of helped me find my path in life. Going to architecture school is a big commitment. Deciding to leave that field behind after the amount of time I'd spent studying in it and the time I'd spent working in it was, well, it should have been a tough decision, but I think what I realized through the work I was doing on the side, doing web design work and digital design work without really having kind of an understanding, but more of a passion for it, is that that's really where my interest lay. I kind of never intended to make a career change, but I just had all these, individual opportunities start to stack on one another. When I was applying for UX jobs, one of my professors mentioned that I should bring up my web design work, even applying for architecture jobs. And I didn't think about doing that. I was like, why would an architecture firm care that I have these web design skills as well? But it was really great advice because the firm that I got hired for, they were really interested in redoing their website. And so they were like, great, you can do architecture work and you can also do web design work for us. So you can, flex both of your skills and build both of your passions. Participating in this program is really important to me because I am someone who didn't have a very clear path into UX. And I'm someone who's benefited a lot from many other people who helped guide me into that path, from professors and peers and other folks who have given me chances where someone with a non-traditional background like mine may not have had those chances in the past. So I'm very fortunate for the opportunities that I've received and the work that I kind of had to do on my own to be able to get myself to this point. I want to be able to pay the goodwill that was shown to me forward to the community and help make sure that future generations of people who are interested in UX don't have to go through the same kind of winding path. That they have some more structure and some more places they can turn for a clearer entry into the field and all of the great things that come with it. Hello. In this part of the course, we'll focus on visual design, which is how a product or technology appears to users. We'll start to create a mockup, which is a high-fidelity design that represents your final product. To create mockups, we'll use visual design elements and layouts. Elements, like typography, color, and iconography, are the building blocks for visual design. Elements are often arranged into layouts using methods like grids, containment, and space. Visual design is a massive world, so at times it might seem overwhelming. Learning visual design elements and ways to arrange them doesn't happen overnight. Professionals across many disciplines spend years learning how to apply what they've learned to their projects. I accumulated my knowledge of visual design from many places like my work in architecture, graphic design classes I took for fun, and even from being on the job as a UX designer. This certificate program is just the start of your journey with visual design. After watching the next few videos, you'll have a solid understanding of some essential elements of visual design and ways to lay them out on a screen. One thing to keep in mind as you move through this part of the course. As we start to discuss visual design elements, like typography and color, we are getting into the field of user interface, or UI design. The fields of UX and UI design are closely intertwined and commonly mistaken for one another. I hope you're excited to get started. Let's go. Hi there. Let's take a moment to remember where we left off. The last time we worked on our dog walker app, we updated the low-fidelity prototype based on feedback from participants in a usability study. Up until this point, we have been focused on the app's function and the basic user flow. Now, we can begin to focus on the look and feel of the design. As a reminder, design can have different levels of fidelity. In UX, fidelity means how closely a design matches the look and feel of the final product. If a design is low fidelity, that means it has a lower amount of complexity and is less refined or polished. We call low-fidelity designs lo-fi for short. UX designers use low-fidelity designs when we want to get ideas out quickly and leave room for exploration. If a design is high fidelity, that means it closely matches the look and feel of the final product and is more refined or polished overall. We call high-fidelity designs hi-fi for short. UX designers use high-fidelity designs when we want to test a design that looks like a real product and get more specific feedback from users. In this course, we'll focus on high-fidelity designs. So let's jump into one kind of high-fidelity design, mockups. A mockup is a static, high-fidelity design that is used as a representation of a final product. Mockups give UX designers an indication of what the product will look like visually. Let's check out examples of mockups that were created by real entry-level UX designers. First, we have Pocket, an imaginary interactive social media and search engine created by Dane, who is now a designer at Google. Notice how different this mockup looks compared to the wireframes and low-fidelity prototypes you've made so far. In a mockup, there are actual photos, use of color, use of shadows, different fonts, and stylized buttons. It looks a lot more like a real app you might use. Let's check out another set of mockups. These are for an app called Lucere, a make-believe takeaway salad and sandwich shop. Lisa, a designer at Google, created these when she was just getting started in the field. Notice how the mockups use color gradients, different text sizes, icons, and even a map. The mockups help you really get a feel for what this product would be like if it came to life. Hopefully you're excited to create your own mockups. When designing your mockups, there are a couple of things to keep in mind. Think about the visual elements you want to use on each screen of your design, such as typography, color, and iconography. Until now, our designs have only featured empty spaces or placeholders for content. Mockups have actual words, images, and icons that will appear in your design. Now is a perfect time to materialize the content that will go here. Keep in mind, going from a wireframe to a mockup should not feel like a paint-by-number exercise. For example, it's okay to place an image in a different part of your mockup design than you planned for in your wireframe. In addition, make sure that you consider ways to lay out elements on a screen, like grids, containment, and space. The way you arrange elements on a screen can make your design aesthetically pleasing, help users interact with your product, and make your designs more accessible. To get started, we're going to discuss a few foundational elements of visual design in detail. Ready? Let's go.
Hi, I'm Chikezie. I'm a UX lead for AR experiences at Google. We design AR experiences for Google Search, for shopping, and other third-party brands. If you're getting into a design tool for the first time, like Figma or Sketch or Adobe XD, you might be wondering, how do I use this tool? How do I create this flow? Like, what does the UI need to look like? Is this even an appealing design? So my recommendation when you are getting ready to design something is to start with sketches. And now that you have your sketches, it's good to bring those sketches into your design tool. Now you're ready to go into high fidelity mockups. When you were sketching with pen and paper, that was low fidelity. Now that you're going into high fidelity, this is where you get to bring those sketches to life. When you're designing something, you want to think about the journey. What are the major moments in the journey that will help a person get from A to B? When you're designing in a tool like Figma or Sketch, you're going to have a lot of things available to you that didn't exist with pen and paper. You're going to have text colors, you're going to have a big color palette, you're going to have text size, you're going to have images, a whole different suite of things available to you to work with. And when you're thinking about bringing something to those tools, you're now entering a phase called high fidelity. When you're making these, this is not only the design that the engineering team is going to look at and say, oh, this is what I'm being asked to build. The product team is also looking at this and thinking, oh, this is the thing that's going to be what the app looks like. This is going to be what the experience looks like. And I'm going to now assess this as, is this the thing that I'm looking for? Is this the solution to the problem that we're going after? So the high fidelity design is not only a very kind of like beautiful and like visual design for the solution, but it's also a communication to the rest of the team, what they are going to build and how they drive that thing forward.
Hi there. It's a super exciting time because you're about to design your very first mockup. I'll begin by introducing you to some of the foundational elements of any mockup. Elements are the building blocks of the mockups you'll create during the certificate program and in the real world. On a basic level, the term visual design in UX refers to how a product or technology appears to the user. In the next few videos, we're going to dive into 3 foundational elements of visual design: typography, color, and iconography. The first foundational element, typography, refers to the use of text and fonts. Typography can help add hierarchy to your designs, make text easy to read, and add visual style. Think about the letters spelled out on the Wizard of Oz movie cover. The larger font size of the title indicates that information is the most important, and the font itself alludes to how playful the movie is. The second foundational element is color. Think about the messages that certain colors communicate, how people understand color, and how colors mix, match, or contrast with one another. Did you ever learn about the color wheel in art class? Well, it comes in pretty handy for UX designers too, because it helps us find colors that are harmonious or complementary. The third foundational element, iconography, refers to the images or symbols associated with a subject or idea. Think about the power icon on your computer. It's really just a circle with a line, but most people know that this icon means power on a tech device. There are lots of other foundational elements, like size, shape, and direction. We won't cover those in detail at this point, but you can learn more about them in the readings and through your own exploration. I'm sure you're excited to get started. And you might think that visual design is the most important aspect of the product, but appearance isn't everything. It's a UX designer's job to ensure that any decisions about a product's visual design still consider usability the top priority. In the next video, we will dive into the first of these elements, typography. See you soon. Welcome back. Time to kick things off with the first foundational element of visual design, typography. Typography refers to the use of text and font. There are 3 steps to find the perfect typography for your design: selecting a type classification, picking a typeface, and choosing a font. Let's define each of these and explore them in more detail. First up is the type classification. Type classification is a general system to describe styles of type. 2 of the most popular type classifications are serif and sans serif. Serif styles of type can be recognized by the tiny lines, called serifs, that trail from the letters as strokes and stems as edges. Look closely at the letter T on the left side of the screen. The small lines hanging off of both ends of the horizontal line at the top of the T help identify the text's type classification as serif. On the other hand, sans serif styles of type don't have these tiny lines. Notice that on the right side of the screen, there are no small lines hanging off of the T. This T is just a simple horizontal and vertical line. That's a clear indicator that this T falls into the sans serif type classification. Okay, once you select a type classification, it's time to choose a typeface. A typeface is the overall style of a letter. Typefaces are distinguished by their stroke weight, shape, type of serif, and line lengths. Each typeface is known by a family name. Some examples of serif typefaces are Times New Roman, Georgia, and Cambria. A few examples of sans serif typefaces include Arial, Helvetica, and Verdana. Historically, UX designers preferred sans serif typefaces for apps and websites because it was more legible on the screen. But as technology has gotten better, so has screen resolution, which means it's no longer difficult to read serif typefaces digitally. In the past few years, serif typefaces have made a comeback with UX designers, and they have even been digitized for modern screen use. All right, after you've chosen a type classification and typeface, it's time to select a font. Font is the size, thickness, and emphasis of letters. The difference between typeface and font can be a little confusing, so let's take a look at this example. In this case, the typeface is Roboto. The font can be more light or bold, italicized or regular, and even more variations. The font, on the right side of the screen, is a collection of all of the characters of a typeface in one size and one style. For example, Roboto Bold in 12-point size is a font, and Roboto Light in 18-point size is also a font. And that's it. You've started to explore the vast world of typography. Fasten your seatbelts because we're just getting started. Next up, we'll describe the importance of typography. See you there. Hello again. In the last video, we examined the 3 steps to find the perfect typography for your design: selecting a type classification, picking a typeface, and choosing a font. But why is typography so important in UX design? Well, if all the text on a page is the same size and visual style, it's hard for users to quickly understand the page's parts and find the specific information they're looking for. To help readers better navigate a page, we need to create a hierarchy. A typographic hierarchy is a method of ordering typefaces and fonts in a layout to create divisions that show users where to focus and how to find information. Remember, product interfaces are often made up of a lot of words on the screen. Creating visual cues can help distinguish some words and phrases as more important than others. 2 common ways to create typographic hierarchy are by changing the typeface's size and weight. Think about when you open a newspaper. The text you notice first is big and bold. This is the newspaper's headline. The headline gives context for what's to come in the article. Similarly, when you open your favorite book, the chapter's title stands out because of the font. The font of the title is usually larger in size and bolder in weight than the other words on the page. Both the headline and the title in these examples are considered header styles. They both have larger and thicker letters than the words to follow. The same thing goes for designing a digital product. Most product interfaces have at least 2 sizes for text: a smaller size that's used for longer text passages, and a larger size that's used for titles and headings. Digital products might also use weight, which is the thickness of the letters in the typeface, to create typographic hierarchy. For example, a bold typeface gives more emphasis or importance to the text. All right, so you now know a bit more about how typefaces and fonts are used to add hierarchy. A second reason why typography is so important for UX designers is legibility, or making text easy to read. As a UX designer, one of your jobs is to make the product easier to read and navigate. The product needs to be readable for all users, including people with low vision. Think about the nutrition facts label on food items that are sold at a grocery store. These food labels are usually printed in bold black text on a white background. Designers ensure that the label is easy to read, regardless of the surrounding design on the food package. This helps all grocery shoppers, including those with low vision, easily identify and read nutritional information about the food, like the calories, vitamins, and ingredients. Similarly, UX designers use easy-to-read typography for digital platforms. For example, during the checkout section of an e-commerce website, designers choose typography that is bold and easy to read so that the user is sure that they are paying correctly. Lastly, be sure that the typography used in your design matches brand guidelines. Brand guidelines are visual style choices used to communicate a brand's identity, values, and mission. Brand guidelines have rules on typography and other visual design elements that have already been researched, tested, and approved by the company's design team. Typography adds to this visual style and displays a company's identity. For example, Google uses a sans serif typeface called Google Sans. The typeface was created by our design team and is seen in all of our marketing material. It is even used in the Google logo. This typeface reinforces the Google brand. If you're designing for a specific company, make sure you ask for their brand guidelines before getting started. Now, it's time to take all that you've learned about typography and apply it to your project. Let's open Figma. I'm going to start my mockup of the homepage of the dog walker app. One important thing to note is that I'm going to create these mockups below the wireframes that I created earlier in Figma. I'll start by adding a phone screen like you learned how to do earlier with my colleague, Karen. Next, I'll draw a text box within the phone screen. When you draw a text box, the design panel on the right side of the screen changes, which allows you to set the typeface, size, weight, and more. In the text box, I'm going to type "busy afternoon." Then, I'll press Enter to start a new line and type "we can take them for a walk." Now, I can play with the typeface, size, and weight of this text. For the homepage of our dog walker app, I'm going to select the font called SF Pro Display. Then, I'm going to select a size of 24 point. This is just the beginning. For detailed instructions about how to work with type in Figma, check out the reading. Have fun, and good luck adding typography to your own designs. Hi there. We've already discussed how thoughtfully chosen typography makes for a better product. Now, let's discuss another element of visual design: color. Did you know color can affect your behavior, mood, and thoughts? Colors can convey emotions, signal actions, and add variety. Red, for example, attracts a lot of attention. That's why things like exit signs, emergency buttons, and stop signs are red. Objects with this color always get noticed. Blue, on the other hand, can communicate serenity and feelings of calmness or peace. That's one reason why blue is considered widely appealing. Keep in mind, certain colors might mean one thing in one region of the world and something totally different elsewhere. You'll learn over time the colors that are most commonly associated with different emotions and how those choices affect your design decisions. For now, I'll explain how color choices and combinations are used in UX design to add emphasis and communicate branding, and can impact accessibility. First, let's talk about how colors can add emphasis in your design. A change in color can draw the attention of users to a focal point in your design. That focal point is often an important action you want users to take, like a sign-up link or a purchase button. Think about the homepage of our dog walker app. We'll want to add emphasis to the schedule button, so we'll probably make that button a bright color. One common rule that UX designers use is the 60-30-10 rule. One neutral color makes up 60% of the color palette in your design. A second complementary color makes up 30% of the palette. A third accent color makes up 10% of the palette to add emphasis. In our dog walker app, we might use white as 60% of the color in the design, gray as 30%, and orange as 10%. Accent colors, like orange in our case, can be used to emphasize or highlight information, whereas neutral colors play a supportive role in backgrounds, lines, and text. Let's pull up our dog walker app in Figma and apply the 60-30-10 rule to the homepage. The last time we worked on the homepage, we added a line of text that said, "Busy afternoon? We can take them for a walk." Let's make this text stand out more by placing a gray rectangle around the text. I'll go to the toolbar at the top left of the page and click on the icon that looks like a square, called Rectangle. From the drop-down menu, I'll select the rectangle, then draw a rectangle in my design. Now, I'm going to change the color of the rectangle to a light gray. In this case, I'll pick this light gray, which has the hex code D4, D4, D4. I'll right-click on the rectangle and select Send to Back so that the text appears on top of the light gray rectangle. There we go. Next, let's create a button. I'll draw a new rectangle following the same steps. This rectangle will be almost as wide as the phone screen, leaving a little bit of white space on the left and right sides. I'm going to use the Align Horizontal Centers button to center the rectangle in the middle of the phone screen. Then, I'm going to change the color of the rectangle to a bright orange to add emphasis, using the hex code FA7B17. I want to make this button stand out because clicking this button is the most important action we want users to take on the screen. Now, I need to add some text to describe this button. I'll go back up to the panel in the top left and click the T for text. I'll draw a text box inside of my orange rectangle. I'll type "choose a time." Then, I'll change the color of the text to white, which is hex code FFFFFF. Whoops, looks like the font is really big. I'm going to change the font size to 18 to better fit within this orange rectangle button. And there you have it. We've begun to add color to our Dog Walker app homepage to show emphasis. Another reason why color is so important in UX design is that colors can communicate branding, which is the visual appearance and voice of a company. Colors play an important role in a company's brand guidelines, just like typography. Color helps define a product's visual identity, making it stand out among competitors. Think about some of the most globally recognized brands and the colors they feature in their products and logos. Does the yellow of McDonald's arches make you feel cheerful? And does the bold red of Coca-Cola make you feel energetic? Some companies even use groups of colors consistently to stand out. For example, have you noticed that Google uses 4 specific colors in all of its branding? Blue, red, yellow, and green. Many of the graphics and animations in this certificate program use the 4 Google colors. That isn't an accident. These colors are consistent across all products, which makes designs from Google easy to identify instantly. When you're working for a company as a new designer, you'll need to be aware of how you use the company's brand colors in your designs. Keep color associations consistent, whether you're designing an app, website, or logo. Third, color choice can impact the accessibility of designs. It's important to check the contrast between the colors you choose. For example, the image on the left uses black text on a white background, which has a high contrast ratio. But the image on the right uses varying shades of green, blue, and yellow on a camo green background, making the text very difficult to read and therefore inaccessible. As a designer, you should follow Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or WCAG, on color contrast standards to make sure your designs are accessible. For more detailed information, check out the readings in this section of the course. One more thing to keep in mind when choosing colors for your design. Test your color choices on various devices and in different environments. Colors can look different on your desktop computer than they do on your mobile phone. Colors can also look different depending on whether you're using the device in daylight or in the dark. One example of this is a viral internet photo from 2015 of a dress that some internet users described as white and gold and others described as black and blue. Many people were confused about how the same dress could be interpreted as completely different colors. But the explanation was simple. The color of the dress changed depending on the color of the light the user was in. The dress looked black and blue under yellow light, and white and gold under blue light. This is just one example of why testing your color choices in different environments is crucial. We could have an endless discussion on color, but the key takeaway is that using color effectively in your designs should help users better navigate the product. Next up, we'll discuss a third element of visual design, iconography. Let's keep going. Hello. Now that we've explored two elements of visual design, typography and color, let's discuss a third, iconography. Iconography is a system of graphic images or symbols that are associated with a subject or an idea. We call these images and symbols icons. On the surface, icons might seem like playful creations, but when made effectively, icons limit wasted text space, catch the user's attention, and are an easy way to transition to another page or location. We rely on icons all the time to give us information in both digital and physical environments. For example, an arrow icon on a button indicates that an elevator will go up or down. Or the sun icon on a computer screen allows us to adjust the screen's brightness levels. Sometimes icons indicate specific actions, like the arrow or sun in these examples. Other times, icons provide supplementary information, like how a battery icon tells you that it may be time to recharge a device. Some icons are commonly known through their widespread use. For example, have you ever seen this icon of a house? This house icon on the navigation menu indicates a path back to the home screen of the app. Since this icon is universally understood by most users, you can simply use the same house icon in your own app designs. However, other icons have specific cultural associations. For example, an American football icon may not be the best icon to represent sports on a global app. That's because American football isn't as popular worldwide as it is in the United States. Using a more universal icon, like a soccer ball, may be more appropriate for a global audience. When using icons in your designs, add a text label to describe what the icon means. If you add an icon of a house, you should also add a text label that says home beneath that icon. The text label also makes the app more accessible, because icons can't be read by a screen reader. Finally, iconography is crucial to a company's brand. Think about the Google Workspace icons, for example. Because of their color and style, there's no mistaking that these icons belong to Google products. When you start your UX design career, the company you work for will likely have their own set of guidelines for in-house iconography, which will help you make design decisions more easily. Let's keep building the homepage of our dog walker app and add an icon. Here's where we left the design in the last video. To get started, I'm going to add a house icon. I'll navigate to Google's Material Design page, which has a list of free icons that are available for anyone to use. I'll click on Resources. How convenient. At the top of the page, icons are listed under Popular Resources. The icons are listed alphabetically, so I'm going to scroll down to H for Home and select the Home icon. I'll click on the blue download button on the bottom left-hand corner of my screen to download this icon to my computer. Then, I'll navigate back to Figma. I'll click on the rectangle in the top left corner and select Place Image. When I do that, a window pops up that asks which file I want to select. I need to find the Home icon that I downloaded and click Open. Now, I'll draw on my app in the spot where I want to place the Home icon. There we go. I can change the color of the icon to orange using the same hex code as the button we added earlier, which is FA7B17. Lastly, I need to add a text box under the icon using the same steps that we've outlined before. I will write Home in the text box. I'm going to center the text below the icon. Then, I'll change the color of the text to use the same orange that we're using throughout the app and make the size of the text 12 point. And that's that. We now have an icon for the homepage of our dog walker app. We've now finished discussing 3 foundational elements of visual design: typography, color, and iconography. Coming up, we'll explain how to arrange those elements within your design. Let's get going. Hey there! You've already learned about a few of the important design elements used to create your mockups. However, you'll need more than just typography, color, and iconography to create a design. You also need to learn about layouts, which are ways to arrange elements on a page. Layouts usually refer to the specific placements of text, style, icons, and images. The goal of layouts is to present information in a logical way, making the important elements stand out. Without a thoughtful layout, your designs will be difficult for users to interact with. Layouts can easily be borrowed or reused from other projects with similar pages. For example, there are popular layouts for home screens, login screens, and even checkout screens. There are many ways to lay out a page in the world of UX design. In the upcoming videos, we will cover a few things that can tie your designs together: grids, containment, and space. Ready to get started? Let's go! Hey there! Let's start our discussion about layouts by focusing on grids. When you design a mockup, the correct placement of elements on your page can improve user flow and make it easier to navigate. But it can be tricky to guess where to place elements within your mockup, especially as a new designer. Luckily, we have tools to make correct placement or layout easier. First, there are basic grids. These intersecting lines divide pages into small squares that allow you to easily lay out elements in a design. The lines on the grid are evenly spaced to help you design consistently and manage spacing of elements. Here's what a basic grid is like in Figma. If you drew wireframes on grid paper in an earlier course, these grids might look familiar. While basic grids are useful to help you design consistently, it's more common for UX designers to use a layout grid. A layout grid is a series of columns and alleys that allow you to organize elements in a design. Columns are the colored blocks, and alleys are the spaces between the columns. Here's what a layout grid is like in Figma. Notice that columns are a light red and are all the same width. The alleys are white and are also all the same width. The number of columns in a layout grid depends on the type of device you're designing for. If you design for a larger screen, like a website on a laptop or desktop computer, the layout grid might have 12 columns. As you design for smaller screens, your layout grid will have fewer columns. For example, the layout grid for a tablet or app includes 4 to 8 columns, and the layout grid for a smartwatch has only 1 column. But keep in mind, no matter what device you're designing for, the number of columns in your layout grid depends on how you want to organize and split up your content. You might be wondering, should I use a basic grid or a layout grid when I design? This varies for each designer, so the choice is yours. Some designers use both basic and layout grids, while others use only one. Some designers don't even use grids at all. When you're just getting started as a UX designer, you might want to use a grid for a few reasons. First, grids create clarity and consistency. An effective grid guides the eye, making it easier and more pleasant to scan elements on the screen. Second, grids quicken the design process, making it faster to place elements on the screen. And third, grids make it easier to collaborate on designs. With a grid, designers will generally know where to place things. Let's check out a mockup from an entry-level designer who now works at Google. Here, Dane created an app called Peacock. On this page, users are prompted to search for friends or locations near them. The page features a search bar above images of cities like New York, San Francisco, and Chicago. Take note of how the squares for each image are exactly the same size, and how the search bar is centered directly in the middle of the screen above the images. You can tell that Dane used a grid to plan his design, which made it easy to place elements. Thanks to the use of a grid, Dane's completed mockup has a visually appealing layout. You could even reuse this layout for another purpose. For example, I could see the same layout being used by a food ordering app, where each image box is a different restaurant. You're starting to get the hang of how to lay out a page. Coming up, we'll discuss another thing to keep in mind when laying out a page: containment. Hello again. We've started to explore how to lay out elements on a page effectively, using grids. Now, it's time to discuss another thing to keep in mind when arranging elements on a page: containment. Containment uses visual barriers to keep designs neat and organized. Barriers like lines or colors help limit content to a specific section of a design. There are 4 methods of containment: dividers, borders, fill, and shadow. Let's discuss each method using an example from the homepage of the Dog Walker app. Do you like what I've done with it while you were working on your own project? I even added a cute little image of a dog on the Choose a Time button. You can learn more about how to find free images like this in the reading. I'm going to have some fun with this mockup to bring to life each of these 4 methods. First, let's talk about dividers. As a refresher, dividers are lines that separate sections. They can be simple yet effective tools for quickly breaking up content that doesn't belong together. In our Dog Walker app, you'll notice that we use a gray divider between each dog walker that's available. Similarly, borders use lines to break up sections of a page. Borders are continuous lines that often form shapes like squares or rectangles. When I first created the Choose a Time button, I just had text and the image of a dog. The lack of a border made it difficult for users to know it was a button. So I decided to add a rectangular border to make it more clearly a button. Third, we have fill. Fill assigns colors to borders and shapes. Just as you might think, the color fills in the object. This makes content stand out, which creates a new focal point within the mockup. The Choose a Time button still isn't as clear as buttons on other apps I've used, so I'm applying an orange fill to give it more emphasis. Lastly, you can add shadows to your designs to create dimension. Often, designers use shadows in combination with borders or fill. Shadows help break up elements even further. Check out the shadow I've applied to the Choose a Time button. Now it's almost 3-dimensional. You feel like it's coming off the page. All right, your mockups should be starting to come together. You now have 2 tools in your toolbox that you can use to lay out elements on a page: grids and containment. Up next, let's add one more tool to your toolbox: spacing, which can help make your mockups even more visually appealing. See you there. Hey there. We've just covered how grids and containment can help you lay out a page. Now, let's add one more tool to your toolbox: spacing. What do we mean by the word space? Well, space is something we're all familiar with. When we write, we leave a space between every word in a sentence. Or, when we look at the home screen of our phones, there is space between each app icon. In UX design, this is called white space. White space is the gaps between elements in a design. Keep in mind, white space is often referred to as negative space. So, why is white space important? First, the use of white space can provide emphasis on a focal point within the design. This can help focus the user on an action they need to take. For example, think about the Google search homepage. The search bar and Google logo are surrounded by white space. The use of white space clearly communicates the action users should take: search. Second, the use of white space can help group items together, which is also known as proximity. When elements, like buttons or text, are placed close to each other on a page, users naturally group these elements together and expect them to be related. On the other hand, when elements are placed far apart from one another, users don't think they're related. Remember Gestalt Principles from earlier in this certificate program? Well, proximity is one of the Gestalt Principles. Let's check out this graphic depiction of proximity. The image on the left contains 16 circles of the same size in a 4x4 grid with similar spacing. The assumption is that all of the circles are grouped together and would be related. The image on the right also contains 16 circles of the same size in a 4x4 grid. However, more space has been placed between the second and third columns of circles. This additional space makes it appear like the circles are split into 2 groups of 8, and those 2 groups would not be related. Third, white space helps with readability. Leaving more white space between elements makes it easier to focus on each element. Take a look at this example. The website on the left has little white space because it uses a large font and a big image, which are grouped nearby one another. This website is pretty difficult to read because our eyes are jumping between elements. In the website on the right, the content is the same, but there is more white space. This design uses a smaller font and a smaller image. This allows the eye to look at each element and makes the website easier to read. Okay, one more thing to keep in mind when it comes to white space. Having too little white space increases the chance of error. For example, some users might end up accidentally pressing the wrong button if there isn't enough space between the buttons. When you get your first job as a UX designer, you may have to help educate your clients or cross-functional teammates about the importance of white space. Businesses often feel that more content is better. It's important to help those stakeholders understand that using white space in the design will make their product easier to use and will hopefully lead to better business results. For example, if the sign-up button is clearly emphasized using white space, more users are likely to click it, which is a win for the business. Now you have all the tools you need to add elements to your mockup and lay out those elements on a page. Good luck putting what you've learned here into practice with your own design project. Hello again. You're making great progress. In this part of the course, you were introduced to visual design, which is how a product or technology appears to users. And you started to create your first mockup. To create mockups, you used visual design elements like typography, color, and iconography. You also learned that elements are often arranged into layouts using methods like grids, containment, and space. In the next part of this course, you will learn about visual design principles, which help improve and refine your mockup. Get ready to keep iterating on your mockup. Hey there! You just learned about visual design elements like typography, color, and iconography. Then, you learned about how to lay out a page using grids, containment, and negative space. Your mockup should be starting to take form. In this part of the course, we'll explore how to refine and improve your mockup using visual design principles. To start off, we'll discuss the power of emphasis, which can help guide the user to the most important parts of a page. Then, we'll cover hierarchy, scale, and proportion. These visual design principles will help you organize the elements on each page of an app. After that, we'll jump into the principles of unity and variety, which can help elements of your app function together or stand out. Next, we'll revisit Gestalt principles like similarity, proximity, and common region. Finally, I'll give you some strategies to help you review the work you've done so far on your mockup. The concepts and principles we'll cover aren't just tools to take out of your toolbox whenever they're needed. They're naturally embedded in the design process and integral to helping inform our design decisions. They'll help you refine your mockups and create products with a great user experience. To get started, let's talk about our first visual design principle. Meet you there. Hello again. There are a few fundamental design concepts you'll need to understand as we start refining our mockups. In this video, we'll cover the importance of emphasis and explain how you should decide what to emphasize in your designs. Let's get started. At a basic level, emphasis means something that attracts attention. Emphasis is all around us, and we depend on it to translate information for us in everyday life. For example, imagine a public speaker giving a speech without placing any emphasis on any of the words, or a pianist playing a song without emphasizing any notes over others. The lack of emphasis would lose the audience's attention and make it challenging for them to follow along. The same idea applies to visual design. We use emphasis to intentionally guide a user to what we want them to pay attention to. In our mockups, we want to use emphasis to provide cues that indicate to the user what is more important or less important on each page or screen. So, how do we give something emphasis in visual design? To emphasize one part of your design over another, give it more visual weight. Visual weight is a measure of the force that an element exerts to attract the eye. Using variables like size, color, or contrast can give an element greater visual weight. No matter the item, everything has a visual weight. To understand what I mean, check out this mockup created by Josh, a UX designer at Google. It's for an app called Zest that helps users track spices, herbs, and seasoning. The mockup design is fairly simple, but it uses design elements and principles to create emphasis exceptionally well. By using white space and a simple typeface, users are naturally attracted to the app's main content. It's images of spices like turmeric and harissa. The images are large and colorful. They have a very heavy visual weight compared to the surrounding text and background. So you might be wondering how you should decide what to emphasize or add visual weight to in your own designs. The key considerations to think through when you're deciding what to emphasize are: where do I want to draw the user's attention? And what are the user's goals? Using emphasis strategically can make it easier for your users to complete tasks, and that creates a great user experience. So let's examine the role emphasis plays to get users to take action. It should be easy for users to find any action or important information they need to complete a task. As you examine your user journey, you might ask yourself, how am I making it easy for users to complete the tasks they need to do? This might involve adjusting your design's navigation based on the results of any usability studies you conduct at this point. Basically, if someone isn't finding a critical feature easily during the study, you want to find a better way to emphasize it. Check out this mock of the book appointment screen from our dog walker app. What's drawing the most attention, and why? We use the color orange to highlight the Book Sarah button. Booking a dog walker is one of the most important steps in the user's journey, so we emphasized it more than the About section and the customer reviews. It's not that these other sections aren't important. We just really wanted to highlight the primary action that we want users to take on this screen. The color orange is bold and draws attention to this key feature, and the size of the button is larger than the surrounding content. These visual design decisions are all part of emphasizing this button and guiding the user to take action. As we move forward, you'll get hands-on practice with deciding exactly what to emphasize in your designs. Awesome! Now we've covered how to use emphasis in your designs. Next up, we'll explore another visual design principle, hierarchy. Welcome back. By now, you might be starting to notice that good visual design comes from understanding visual design principles. Those principles are like tools that a designer uses to create visually appealing mockups and prototypes. To get started, let's define hierarchy. Hierarchy is a visual design principle that orders elements on a page and highlights them by their importance. The goal of hierarchy is to guide the user. Adjusting size and color is a common way to distinguish hierarchy in visual design. Hierarchy in UX design can help a user understand the relative importance between different elements. You might be wondering how hierarchy is different from emphasis. Although they're definitely related concepts, hierarchy refers to a group of elements that are organized in order of importance. On the other hand, emphasis is about making one element stand out from the other elements surrounding it. Think about when you browse the homepage of a media outlet to catch up on the news. You usually check out the headlines first, right? Most people do this to get a quick idea of what each story is about. The headlines are the elements that stand out on the page because they have the most importance. Below the headline is a summary of the story, which usually has a font that is smaller and less bold. In this case, the typography created hierarchy on the homepage. So why do we need hierarchy anyway? Well, in UX design, we always want to make it clear to the user where to focus first and what action to take. Hierarchy helps point users to the first step they should take in their user journey. With hierarchy, the more important the information is, the more we should make it visually prominent. We apply hierarchy when we create mockups to help users navigate an app effortlessly. Hierarchy helps them find the most relevant information and main action buttons first. Hierarchy also guides the user to the most important places on the page. Let's revisit the Dog Walker app to understand how this applies. This page is part of the second step of booking an appointment. Under the three icons indicating the steps for booking an appointment, there's the text, "Select the dog walker." Ordering this text at the top of the page indicates that most of the content underneath it will contain information about this process. Sizing the text larger makes that point even clearer. As we move down the page, there's the next line of text, availability based on your date and time. This text is smaller than select the dog walker, but larger than the details about each dog walker. It's important for the user to recognize that all of the dog walkers listed are available at the date and time they selected. Also, notice that the names of each dog walker are in a darker gray color than the rest of the text associated with that dog walker. Remember, hierarchy highlights elements on their page by their importance, so this subtle design choice indicates to the user that they should focus on the name of the dog walker first, and then look at the other details. This is similar to the technique used in the headline example we discussed earlier. Hierarchy also affects accessibility for users. Earlier, you learned about assistive technologies that can help users focus on the most important information on the page, like screen readers. By using accessibility annotations in your wireframes, or in this case, mockups, users will be able to read elements in a hierarchical order. Accessibility annotations create a visual hierarchy by indicating the order that elements on a screen should be read. In addition, these annotations can help users understand the order in which they should interact with each element. Great! You now know about hierarchy and how to apply it in your mockups. You've already explored 2 visual design principles, so it's on to the next, scale and proportion. Meet you there. Hi again. By now, you're starting to get a feel for the different visual design principles that can help improve your mockups. Earlier, we explored the concepts of emphasis and hierarchy. In this video, I'll start out by explaining the basics of scale and proportion, which are 2 different but related ideas. Then, we'll go over how to apply scale and proportion to your mocks. Finally, we'll discuss how accessibility should be kept in mind for scale and proportion. Let's get started. First, let's define scale. Scale is a concept that's used to explain the size relationship between a given element and the other elements in the design. The most important elements in a design are bigger than the less important elements. So, why is scale important for UX design? Well, there are a few reasons. First, manipulating the size or scale of a single element, like a button, is a great technique for creating emphasis. To emphasize an element, you can use scale to make that element larger than the other elements around it. Think of how using a magnifying glass can instantly enlarge your view of an object. In the same way, creating variation in size of certain elements in your design can help you highlight specific areas. In addition, scale can show similarity and contrast between elements. If 2 elements are the same size, they are perceived as being equal or similar. However, if 2 elements have a large contrast in size, they are perceived as being different from one another. Lastly, scale can be used to communicate visual hierarchy. Earlier, you learned how hierarchy is used to communicate the order of importance for the information on a page. Scale helps to create visual hierarchy. For example, typography can be easily changed using scale to emphasize the content on a page in different ways. This image shows how different type scales can be used to create headlines. The most important headline, Headline 1, or H1, has the largest type scale and appears at the top of the scale table. H1 headings are usually used to convey the most important content. There are even websites where you can enter your base size of font, and the website will provide you with a type scale, suggesting sizes of font for more and less important information. Okay, now that you've been introduced to scale, let's discuss the concept of proportion. For UX designers, scale and proportion are very closely related ideas, but they're not exactly the same. Proportion is about the balance or harmony between elements that are scaled. In other words, proportion helps UX designers make sure the size relationship between elements makes sense. This means that the elements appear to be in balance with one another. If one element in your design increases in size, then the other elements should also increase in size at the same rate, in order to remain proportionate. Check out this row of icons from our dog walker app. These 3 icons have the same proportions. But imagine we increase the scale of the first icon. Notice how out of proportion they are now? So, how do we make sure the proportions in our designs are balanced? One way is to review the page after changing the scale of a particular element to make sure the overall balance of the design still seems correct. Another way to maintain consistent scale proportions is by including certain size specifications for a design in a design system. We'll discuss design systems in much more detail later on. Great. You're learning the basics of scale and proportion. But how do we apply these principles to our mockups? Let's revisit the dog walker app as an example. On this page of the app, the user has already selected the day and time their dog needs to be walked. Now, they need to select the dog walker. Notice how the images of the 4 dog walkers are the same scale? As we learned earlier, when elements, like these photos, are the same size, they are perceived as being equal or similar. In addition, there is balance or harmony between these elements, which means they are proportional. However, if we change the scale of the images of the dog walkers, they quickly fall out of proportion. If you're like me, looking at these different sizes of images might make you cringe. In addition, the different sizes place an emphasis on Michael's and Melissa's profiles because their images are larger than the others. Remember, if one element in your design increases in size, then the other elements should also increase in size at the same rate in order to remain proportionate. Awesome! You've learned about 2 more visual design principles, scale and proportion. Coming up, we'll go through the principles of unity and variety. Let's keep going. Hey there! In this video, we'll discuss a couple more visual design principles, unity and variety. Let's jump right in. Unity measures how well elements of your design work together to communicate an idea. A design with unity is pleasing to look at, clear to the user, and easy to understand. Unity can be created by using a consistent color scheme, complementary fonts, and consistent spacing. On the other end of the spectrum is variety, which is about varying the elements in your design to break up monotony. Using diverse elements can add energy and pizzazz to a design. There are countless ways to incorporate variety in your designs, like using different shapes, colors, textures, and patterns. Do you have any walls in your house that are painted an accent color? Or have you ever paired brightly colored shoes with a plain outfit? If so, you probably understand how variety can help break up predictable patterns. During the beginning stages of your low-fidelity wireframes, creating unity or variety is not the focus. When you create your lo-fi wireframes, your buttons and graphics are usually just black and white placeholders. During this stage, you're more concerned about how features function together and less about their appearance. When you eventually get to designing mockups, you can focus on the whole picture. Ask yourself questions like, did I use colors in a consistent and purposeful way? Did the typefaces I used work well together? And is there enough variety to keep my design interesting? Keep in mind that neither unity or variety are good or bad. There are parts of your design that require one or the other, or even both. Variety can be used strategically to add visual weight and create emphasis. Think about an app for a news outlet. The most effective media outlet apps have unified designs. Most stories will use dark text on a white background. Now imagine if there was a breaking news report about the weather. The breaking news story background might turn a bright color like red or yellow. Adding this variety to the notification helps break the consistency and lends more urgency to the story. These elements of variety help the breaking story stand out, but they only work because the styles of the other stories are unified. But variety doesn't have to take away from unity. In fact, variety and unity can work together in harmony. Like we discussed in an earlier video, too much uniformity can make it difficult for users to know where to focus. With too much similar typography or iconography, users can find it hard to identify text and important information from a sea of identical design elements. A balanced combination of unity and variety can provide visual cues for users while maintaining their attention. You want to make sure it's visually gratifying to use a product too. Variety in texture, color, typography, and shape can make all the difference. This variety can add emphasis to guide users to press a button or divert their attention to a section of a page. But be careful. Too much variety can reduce harmony and make it harder to read important info. The key is balance. Let's quickly think about how unity and variety come into play in our dog walker app. Check out the mockup of our homepage. There is a consistent orange color scheme and even spacing between elements. This unity makes the homepage pleasing to look at and easy to understand. Variety also plays an important role here. Most of the design is white or light gray, but the Choose a Time button is orange. This variety in color adds emphasis that guides the user to press this button. Alright, you've learned about so many visual design principles like emphasis, hierarchy, scale, proportion, unity, and variety. There are many more visual design principles you can learn on your own as you continue on your journey to becoming a UX designer. I encourage you to stay curious and keep learning. Hi again. So far, in this part of the course, we've been discussing visual design principles. Now, we're ready to explore some more complex concepts. In this video, we'll discuss a psychological principle called Gestalt. You might remember learning about Gestalt in an earlier course, but now it's time to learn more in depth. To refresh your memory, Gestalt principles describe how humans group similar elements, recognize patterns, and simplify complex images when we perceive objects. In other words, the human brain will attempt to simplify and organize complex images by subconsciously arranging the parts into a cohesive whole. Basically, your brain is wired to see structure, logic, and patterns. Gestalt principles help us better understand how all the individual design choices we've been making come together, and how they might be interpreted by users. Gestalt principles also offer designers a way to step back and review their work from a different perspective. It's easy for designers to get so caught up in the details that we lose sight of the overall project. Applying Gestalt principles to our designs allows us to really notice how our design elements work together. Similar to how we can use multiple visual design principles to create emphasis, several Gestalt principles can be applied to one mockup design at the same time to make visual connections. In this video, we'll cover 3 of the Gestalt principles: similarity, proximity, and common region. It's important to note that there are a lot of Gestalt principles, including closure, continuation, and symmetry. We'll only cover similarity, proximity, and common region in this video though, because they give the broadest overview for how Gestalt theory is used in UX design. Okay, let's define these principles and explore how they apply to design. We'll start with similarity. The principle of similarity states that elements that look similar are perceived to have the same function. In other words, similarity focuses on things that look or behave the same way, and how the user will relate those items. Let's examine how our dog walker app uses the principle of similarity. Here, you'll notice that we use orange to symbolize actions. The dog walker tab across the top of the screen, the selected dog walker checkmark, and the next button are all actions the user can select, and they all use the same color. Even if we go to a new page of the app, the color orange still continues to point users to the action they need to take. This is an example of how color is used to group what we see. Your brain automatically groups these orange elements. Because they are the same color, they are perceived to have the same function. Another example of the similarity principle in action is how every circle on this page represents a user profile. All of the circles have the same visual weight on the page. Whether the user has a profile picture like Sarah M, or uses a first initial like Alice or Sal, your brain automatically makes the connection that these similar shapes represent the same idea, a user profile. You'll instantly make this connection when you see other circles of this size in the app. Next, let's explore the principle of proximity, which states that elements that are close together appear to be more related than elements that are spaced farther apart. In other words, humans perceive objects close to each other as connected. The way sighted people and screen readers read is an example of the proximity principle in action. The lack of space between letters or characters tells you that those letters or characters form a word. And the space between and after those groups of letters or characters let you know that a new word has started. The principle of proximity is also used in our dog walker app. When a user is scheduling an appointment with a dog walker, the app provides a horizontal list of the names of the user's pets: Charlie, Broccoli, and Rover. The user selects which dogs need a walk. The closeness of these buttons lets you know that they're related. And the closeness of the list of dogs to the question, "Who is going for a walk?" lets you know that the question is related to this list of dogs. On the other hand, This question and list of dogs is far away from the recurring booking box. The space between these elements indicates that they are not related. Okay, one more Gestalt principle to cover. Finally, there is the principle of common region, which states that elements located within the same area are perceived to be grouped together. Although it's connected to the principle of proximity, the principle of common region differs because it has less to do with spacing elements apart and more to do with using visual elements to form sections. Here, we have a mock-up of an app created by a UX designer at Google named Kai-Wei. The app is called Rostery, and it was created to help college professors remember their students' faces and names in a fun and simple way. On this screen, the app is broken into 3 sections: the navigation bar at the top, the memorization progress graph, and the names of the students the professor wants to remember. Each of these sections contains multiple elements like graphics, photos, and text. Using the principle of common region, your eye automatically groups the content that's in the same area together. In this example, Kai-Wei added a border around each group of elements, which is an easy way to create a common region. Let's also check out the principle of common region in the Dogwalker app. I used a blue background behind our selected content to create a common region. The user is able to quickly identify the items on a blue background as their selected Dogwalker, and the content on the white background as unselected items. The key takeaway from Gestalt Principles is that we should make sure that our designs work with the way our minds naturally organize elements. When used thoughtfully, Gestalt Principles can help create visual balance. Visual balance is the sense that a design is equally weighted on both sides of its emphasized center. Visual balance gives the design a feeling of completeness. You can learn more about visual balance in the reading. And that's it for now. You're starting to think like a real UX designer and can apply these Gestalt principles to your own mockups. Good luck! Hi there. At this point, your mockups have come a long way since the start of the course. You've added elements to your mocks, applied visual design principles, and made sure your design communicates a clear and cohesive idea. Now it's time to take a pause. Even the most experienced designers pause and review their progress at various points. It's often easier to figure out how far you've come and how much you have left to do when you have a checklist. But what should you include on that checklist? I'm going to provide you with some things to keep in mind. There should be 4 main categories on your checklist: detailed view, page level view, function level view, and app level view. It's helpful to start with small details and work your way up to the big picture. So the first category on our checklist is the detail view. Focusing on the small things first allows you to catch places where you might have made mistakes with elements. It's helpful to review individual elements like typography, color, and iconography to check if they're consistent throughout your mocks or if they're out of order. For example, in the Dogwalker app, when checking my work, I found one icon where I'd accidentally used orange F18530, even though I used orange FA7B17 throughout the rest of the design. Second, use a page level view to check if all of the elements on each page are balanced and unified. Check out the page from a bird's eye view to see if anything is out of place. This is also a good time to consider the scale and proportion of the elements within a page. For example, when I first created the book appointment page of my Dogwalker app, I indented the bios of each Dogwalker to try to make their name stand out. However, after doing a page level view, I felt like the bios were out of balance with the rest of the page and decided to align everything on the left instead. In addition, in the first version, the checkmark icon stood alone. To help improve the balance of the page, I added a gray circle around the checkmark icon. Next, review your designs using a function level view. In other words, you need to make sure your designs are operational. In particular, check to make sure you have included all of the navigation elements in your designs so that it's ready for prototyping. Ask yourself questions like, does each page have a way to move forward and backwards? Is there a button to perform the main action for the page? And do I need a button to allow users to undo an action? For example, when I review pages of the Dogwalker app at the function level, I'm checking for elements like the back arrow in the upper left corner and the X in the upper right corner. I'm also checking to make sure I included a button that allows users to perform the main action for the page, which in this case is to book Sarah, the dog walker. Lastly, take a step back and review your design as a whole. This is called an app level view because you review the entire app. Thinking about your designs from the big picture helps ensure that your product overall looks and functions the way you want. To do this, I recommend zooming out in Figma so that you can review multiple pages of your design at the same time. For example, here is an app level view for the dog walker app I've been working on. You've seen many of these pages as examples in different videos, but here is the app design altogether. I've been iterating on these mockups while you've been working on yours, but I still have a long way to go. As part of the app level view, I'll check for things like consistency in how the product looks overall. For example, the 3 icons across the top of my app page should stay in the same position, no matter what page I'm on. There you have it. You've made it through the 4-step checklist for reviewing your design. This is yet another moment to iterate on and improve your designs. Your mockups should be getting better and better with each tweak you make. Keep up the great work. Another mission accomplished. That completes this section of the course about how to refine and improve your mockup using visual design principles. Your mockup should be looking good. Here's everything we've covered in this section. First, you learned about the importance of emphasis, which can help guide the user to the most important parts of a page. Building on that, you explored how to create levels of hierarchy. Distinguishing the elements of a product's design in order of importance guides users to effectively use a product. Then, you learned the basics of scale and proportion, which organize the elements on each page of an app. After that, you discovered the influence that unity and variety can have in guiding a user's attention and maintaining it. Balance is key here. You also revisited a few popular Gestalt principles: similarity, proximity, and common region. Then you wrapped up by exploring some strategies to help review the work you've done so far on your mockup. All of these concepts are truly important in informing our design decisions. Up next, we'll keep working on our mockups and learn about design systems. Meet you there. Welcome back. You've been exploring the importance of visual design elements and principles, and how to lay out a page. You even made your own mockups and have been iterating to improve them. In this part of the course, you'll explore the world of design systems and sticker sheets. First, I'll introduce you to the parts of a design system, as well as the benefits of using a design system. Then, we'll explore 2 companies' design systems that are free for you to utilize in your own work. Next, we'll use a design system library in Figma, and you'll have an opportunity to use one in your mockups. Finally, we'll learn how to use sticker sheets and how you can set up a sticker sheet in Figma. In my opinion, this is going to be the most exciting part of the course. I work on material design, which is Google's design system, so I'm really looking forward to giving you a behind-the-scenes tour of my world. Let's get to it. Hi again. In this video, we'll discuss design systems and why they matter. Let's start with the definition. A design system is a series of reusable elements and guidelines that allow teams to design and develop a product following predetermined standards. Have you ever worked at a business that had a series of guidelines for different processes? Did it get hard to keep track of all the rules? Well, design systems help teams combine all of these different guidelines in one place, including important information like brand guidelines, components, color palettes, and more. For example, a design system outlines rules about how to use your company's brand colors in your designs, and which colors should be used for icons and typography. Some of the visual elements frequently included in a design system are color, iconography, layout, copy, animation, elevation, typography, and illustration. So, how are design systems set up? Most design systems include visual styles, guidelines for how to apply them, UI patterns, and supporting code for developers. Let's go through each of these in more detail. First up, visual styles. Defining the styles for core visual design elements, like typography, color palettes, and iconography, helps companies express their brand more consistently. This also helps UX designers improve the user's experience. Next are the guidelines. This is where the design principles, editorial guidelines, and implementation guidelines are defined. Clear rules about how certain components or styles should be used within a product help designers stay consistent. Then there's UI patterns. UI patterns include elements like text, color, or icons. Components, which are made up of elements like a button or form label. Modules, which are groups of components, like a header with a logo or a navigation bar at the top of the page. And templates, which are groups of modules put together to form pages. In addition, each of these sections of a design system usually includes detailed notes about which elements, components, modules, and templates are the most important, and how often to use each one. And finally, design systems support code for developers. To help developers build out designs correctly, design systems often include the code to create each of the provided elements or components. Compiling all this information into a comprehensive design system ensures that all the different elements in your designs will carry through to the final product. All right, now that you're starting to get to know design systems, let's explore the benefits of design systems in the next video. Let's keep going. Let's keep learning about design systems. Depending on where you work, design systems might be really important in your first job as a UX designer. Why? Well, there are a lot of benefits of design systems. For one, design systems create consistency for designers and users. When designers are limited to a certain set of elements, there's less chance that they'll introduce inconsistencies in the product or the company's brand. For example, imagine the design system for our dog walker app instructs designers to always use orange buttons with rounded edges in their designs. Although there are dozens of shades of orange to choose from, we've decided to use the color FA7B17 in our design system. We've also decided that the text on these buttons should always use the typeface SF Pro Display. By deciding on these visual styles up front and including them in the design system, it's easier for designers to create the buttons and for users to notice them in the product. Another benefit of design systems is that they help reinforce a company's brand identity. Design systems keep the visual design elements consistent within a product and across products. For example, Google's design system, called Google Material, has 4 primary colors: blue, red, yellow, and green. If you open any app on your phone from Google, like Google Maps or Google Drive, you'll notice these 4 colors in the designs. You might also notice that all Google products use the same font, which we call Google Sans, and they favor rounded corners over square ones. Another benefit of design systems is that they're scalable. The term scalable describes a system that's able to maintain performance levels when workload increases. This can be particularly helpful at a rapidly growing company like a startup. For instance, if there's a design system that's already set up with a specific color palette and typography, it can be easier to iterate on the design as the product evolves. It's also easier to onboard new designers to the team. A fourth benefit of design systems is that they save time and money by increasing efficiency for individuals and teams. When there's a system that can be uniformly applied to the designs, members of a team will have fewer questions about design specifications, so the work can be finished more quickly. Finally, design systems help designers and developers work together more effectively. Before the introduction of design systems, projects often hit obstacles when designers handed off their designs to developers. These challenges arose because the design and development teams tended to operate independently, and each team had different requirements. By building a design system together, design and development teams are aligned from the beginning. This allows a developer to receive a design and immediately know what code needs to be written to bring the design to life. It's important to know that not all design teams have a fully developed design system, but those that do usually find that it elevates the quality of their interactions and products. Also, the way that you interact with design systems as a new UX designer will depend on the size of the company you're working for. At larger companies, you'll probably use a design system that's already been set up. But if you start out at a smaller company, you might be expected to help build a new design system, which is a big challenge, but also a great learning opportunity. Whatever size company you work for, you should always be ready to follow a design system or contribute ideas to improve an existing system. That might mean anything from updating the colors or typography in the style guide to defining components and designing templates. Coming up, we'll explore Google's public design system, Material Design, which has been used as a model for a lot of other organizations. Material Design is the team I work on, so I'm really looking forward to giving you a tour of my world. Hi there. It's important for UX designers to understand how to use a design system in the most efficient way. In this video, we'll explain design system libraries and how they help designers and developers. We'll also explore Google's own design system, called Material Design, to understand how this works in action. Material Design is a public design system created by Google, and it's used by designers and developers around the world to create different mobile apps and websites. We also have a private version of this design system that's used internally for various product teams. It's called Google Material. Currently, I'm a staff interaction designer on the Material Design team here at Google. And as someone who didn't study UX in college, I found design systems to be a super helpful way to learn about the basics of good design. The guidelines in the system helped me understand the principles of user interface design. Some companies don't share their design systems with the public, but Google decided to make these resources public for designers, developers, and engineers to interact with and learn from, so you should definitely take advantage of the opportunity. All right, ready to explore material design with me to get a better sense of how this all works? Let's go. I'll start by navigating to material.io. The Material site has different pages you can explore. The Design page has lots of foundational guidance for designers about how to use navigation, color, type systems, and more. I encourage you to read through these articles in detail to polish your design skills. The Components page has building blocks that you can download and use in your own designs, like buttons and date pickers. As you might notice, there are a lot of components you can utilize here. Let's take a look at the Buttons component. There is a ton of information here for you to explore on your own. The Material site doesn't just provide a button. Material also shows you how to use it effectively in your own designs. The Develop page is next. I'm not going to spend much time on this page because it's meant for developers and contains code they can use. Finally, I'll show you the Resources page. This one is my favorite because there's lots of helpful information for new designers like you. It contains links to free downloadable icons, fonts, a typescale generator, and more. There are even baseline design kits for Figma and Adobe XD that allow you to use material layouts and the component library as you're creating your own designs. Okay, cool. Now, let's dig a little deeper. I'm going to share a few resources to help you get started. Let me navigate to the Design page and click on Material Theming. One of the main reasons designers use the Material Design system is because you can customize it to better reflect your company's brand. There's a baseline theme that can be used as is, or you can customize it as little or as much as you want in order to make the design system work for your product or company. For example, check out how this simple button has been customized. Remember earlier in this course when you learned about iconography and I downloaded the home icon from Material? I downloaded that from Material's icon library, another great free resource to take advantage of. There are over 1,000 icons in 5 different styles for you to use in your apps. Okay, one more tip. One of the coolest things you can do on the Material Design website is explore the Color tool. To find it, navigate to the Resources tab, scroll down to the Tools section, and the Color tool is here in the top right. Okay, here we go. I'm starting with a basic page design that includes an app bar and floating action button with our primary color applied. I can preview darker or lighter tones of this color, or try out other colors. The tool will adjust the text colors automatically for optimal contrast. Keeping our accessibility guidelines in mind, we can make choices about white versus black text depending on the tone of the background color. There's even a breakdown of text readability based on large size text versus normal size text. Feel free to play around with this color tool on your own. It's pretty useful when creating mockups. As a new UX designer, you may be working for a company like Google that has its own established design system, like Material. On the other hand, you might work for a smaller company or startup, where you need to help build one. Now that you know what design systems are and have explored a section of Google's material design library, you should have a clear idea of the different elements design systems might include. Coming up, we'll explore a design system from another well-known company, Shopify. See you soon. Hi again. You've just learned about some of the visual elements like color and text in material design, the public design system offered by Google. In this video, we'll explore Polaris, the design system offered by the e-commerce company Shopify. Shopify offers online businesses services like marketing, shipping, and payments. This design system was created to help designers and developers make seller-friendly products using the Shopify platform. I'll start by navigating to polaris.shopify.com and I'll land on the homepage. First, as I start to scroll down, I'll find the Guides section, which offers practical advice for designing customer-friendly experiences. These include guidelines for internationalization, which is how to make your product work in other languages and countries, and how to design an app to work with the Shopify platform. Next, as I continue to scroll down, Shopify highlights 4 different parts of their design system. Let's explore each one briefly now, and we'll go into more detail later in the video. The Content section gives great guidelines for how to choose the best language that goes into the design. Then, there's the Design section, where you can find all the visual elements like color, type, and icons that will help enhance your mockup designs. After that, you can find the Components section. It's full of lots of UI components for designers and developers. And finally, there's the Experiences section. This includes information about page layouts, mobile patterns, common error messages, and more to meet Shopify's guidelines. As I keep scrolling down the homepage, I'll find the What's New section, which is a great place to discover Polaris updates. And finally, there's the Resources section. Here you can find UI kits that can be used for your designs in Figma or Sketch. We'll cover UI kits in more detail later. Now that you have an idea of where everything is in the design system, let's go back to the top of the page and navigate to the Polaris Foundations page. There's a sidebar divided into categories based on key elements to consider in your designs: accessibility, internationalization, information architecture, and mobile. Let's spend a little time in the information architecture section. As you learned earlier in the course, information architecture is about structuring the content in the design for the best user interaction. The information architecture guidelines include a definition of IA, why Shopify values IA, their information architecture principles, and more. Let's scroll back up and check out the content section next. This section provides best practices for voice and tone, grammar and mechanics, and naming. There are a lot of helpful tips about content and writing, no matter what platform you're designing for. Then, in the actionable language section, there's information about the words we should use to guide users to take action in the most efficient way as they use a product. Okay, let's go back up to the top of the page and click on the Design section. Lots of the visual design elements we covered earlier are all here, like color, typography, and sounds. You can also explore some of the more technical elements like spacing and interaction states. So that's a quick tour of Shopify's design system, Polaris. Now you have 2 design systems that you can reference as you continue to build your own designs. There are many more popular design systems out there, so keep exploring. Coming up, we'll cover sticker sheets, which are a collection of different elements and components that go into your design system. Meet you there. Hi again. So far, you've learned about the basics of design systems. You also explored design systems from Google and Shopify that you can utilize for your own work. In this video, we'll explore sticker sheets, which are also known as design kits. Sticker sheets are a collection of elements and components that make up part of the design system. What exactly does that mean? Well, here's an example of a sticker sheet for the Dog Walker app. Notice how I'm including the colors, buttons, icons, and navigation bars that I use often in my designs. Carefully documenting elements and components prevents me from making errors or having inconsistencies in my designs. So why are these named sticker sheets? It's because you can figuratively peel off each element to stick into your design with a simple copy and paste. Cool, right? Think back to when you designed the first draft of your mockup. You might have reused certain elements like text, colors, or icons, and components like buttons. These are the kinds of things that you'd put onto a sticker sheet. As you learned earlier, a component is made up of elements. For example, a button is a component that is made up of elements like text, color, and shape. Have you ever grouped items together in Figma or PowerPoint to be able to copy and paste the whole group of items? That's basically a component. In Figma, components are reusable. Figma allows you to label the first component you make as the component and refer to any copies of this component as component instances. To make it easier to keep track of where my components are, I've chosen to place them on my sticker sheet. Now, whenever I make a change to the component, the instances will reflect the change as well. For example, if I change the primary button color from orange to blue in the sticker sheet, then the instances that are tied to my main component will update as well. This saves me from having to update a dozen buttons whenever I make a minor design change. Plus, it increases that consistency we've been talking so much about. As a new UX designer, you'll probably want to make your own sticker sheet. The good news is that making a sticker sheet is pretty easy. To make a sticker sheet, create a blank frame. Then, copy and paste the elements and components that are frequently used throughout your design to the sticker sheet. For example, in the Dog Walker app, I pulled the buttons, drop-down, chips, and a walker profile. I also need to show the different states for each element or component. Remember, states are visual representations that communicate the status of a component or interactive element. Notice how there's a white version and an orange version of the reviews icon? This difference in color represents the inactive and active states. The sticker sheets will be useful to other UX designers working on the designs and to engineers who need to build each of the components using code. For example, if you start working with another designer on your project, having a sticker sheet as a simple style guide to refer to can make communication between the two of you much easier. And as your design team gets bigger, sticker sheets are super helpful to keep designs across the company consistent. That way, you won't accidentally create a rectangle button with sharp corners when your teammate used rounded corners. Plus, if a designer joins your team when you're in the middle of the design process, they can get started right away with the design elements you've already assigned to the project. The takeaway here is that designers use sticker sheets to help make their work go faster and to avoid rework. And that's a wrap. You now know why sticker sheets are so useful for UX designers and how to make a sticker sheet for your own design. Hi again. You've learned what a design system is and have seen a couple of examples of design systems from Google and Shopify. Now I'm going to teach you how to use elements and components from existing design systems in your own mockups. In your first job as a UX designer, you'll likely use a design system to build your product faster. You might use a design system created in-house at your company, or a public design system like the ones used at Google, Microsoft, or Apple. Either way, you'll need to know how to use the specifications and guidelines from an existing design system to build parts of your own mockups. Incorporating a design system into your work can take several forms. You might include components from an existing design system and just adjust elements like colors or type to match the branding of your design. Or you might mix some of your own components with some components you pull from a design system. You've already seen an overview of what material looks like, but let's dig into it. We'll use the material design system in Figma to pick out a few elements for an alternative version of our dog walker app. Keep in mind, there is a ton to explore when it comes to material design. We could spend an entire course on this topic. But in this video, we'll just talk about a few select things to help you get started. I'm going to begin with the Material Design Systems UI kit in Figma and start a new file using the kit. This kit will be linked in your course readings. All right, here we go. I've landed on the cover page and I'll navigate to the Material Theme page. There are a lot of helpful preset styles here I can customize for things like typography, color, elevation, and states. We've discussed typography and color before, but let me briefly explain elevation and states. Elevation is Material Design's system for adding layering or depth to your interface. The screen background is usually at 0 elevation, while a button might be at 4 elevation, so it appears to be lifting off of the screen. Important features like navigation and alerts have higher elevation, so they are visible to users. This is one of my favorite features of material design, so I really encourage you to read those guidelines. Next, we have states. States are visual representations that communicate the status of a component or interactive element. For example, in our dog walker app, imagine what a button would look like when a user taps or presses on it. We'll need to add states to communicate the status of the button to the user. Material components use a ripple overlay to provide the user feedback that they have successfully pressed on something interactive. There are many approaches to interaction states, and material design can be a helpful reference as you make your own decisions. Okay, that's it for the material theme page. You'll also notice a sticker sheet page and a components page, which we'll talk about in more detail soon. Now, things are about to get exciting. I'm going to pick out a few elements and components from material design to quickly create an alternative version of the homepage of the dog walker app. To begin, I'm going to create a new page and draw a frame for a phone. To do this, I'm going to click on the Frame tool in the top left corner. The design panel on the right side will show the preset frame options. I'm going to select this one. Great! Now that I have my phone outline, I need to add a navigation bar to the top of the screen. So let's go to the sticker sheet page. I'm going to go to the app bar frame and I'll select this app bar. I'll copy it by pressing Ctrl and C or Command and C. Then I'm going to go back to my Material Design for New App page in the left sidebar. I'll press Ctrl and V or Command and V to paste it into our new mobile frame. Great! Seems like it automatically pasted into the middle of my frame. So I'm going to use the Align Top button on the right side panel to move to the top of the screen. Next, let's add a bottom navigation bar. Instead of going back to the sticker sheet, I can also add this from the Assets panel on the left side of the screen, since it's been made a Figma component. If I expand the bottom nav item, I see there are a few options available. I think this one with the 3 items will work, so I'll drag it from the panel onto our phone frame. It pasted into the middle of the mobile frame again. So I can press the Align to Bottom button, or I can simply just drag this component down to the bottom of the screen myself. These placeholder items for favorites, search, and information need to be updated to match my dog walker app. I might keep the favorites icon and use it for a new list of trusted dog walkers, but I have to replace the search and information sections with icons and labels that match my own design, like a home icon for the homepage and a calendar icon for scheduling a dog walker. The idea behind these default icons from material design is to give you a layout that you can adjust as you like. You can easily swap out the icons and text to fit the needs of the product you're designing. To swap out the icons, I'll detach the bottom nav we added to our frame from the main material component. To do this, I'll right-click on the bottom nav and select the Detach Instance option from the menu. Next, I'll select the search icon and repeat the process to detach it. Now it's time to add in the new icons. Luckily, I have the 3 icons we need for the dog walker app already downloaded to my computer from Material Design. So here, I can quickly add the home icon, for example, to represent the home page. I'll also want to swap out the text description below the icon. It used to say search, and now, with my new icon, I want it to say home. For the sake of this demonstration, I'm just going to add the home icon, but you can imagine how this would work to update the other two icons to match my design needs as well. One more thing, you might not be able to tell, but this new icon is a true black, and it's darker than the original two icons. Let's check what color the other two icons are so we can make this one match. If I double-click on one of the original icons, I can see the color selection in the right side panel. It looks like the original icon is colored 03 on primary / medium emphasis. You may be wondering why the color has a name instead of a hex code. This is because I'm using a saved color style from the Material Design color library. Now I'm going to go back to my new home icon. When I click on it, I can see in the right side panel that the color of my new icon is 000000. So I need to update it to 03 on primary medium emphasis. Good, that's better. Something else I'll need for this design is a big call to action button. This is the button that I want users to click on to begin scheduling a dog walker. I'll go back to the components page and search for a button. Let's try out a signature material design component, the floating action button, or FAB. These buttons stay in a fixed position on screen, so they're always visible and easily reachable on a phone. This button named To Extended might work. Let's try it out on our page. Let's change this placeholder text of Create to Schedule to match our app. Our text is longer than our container now, so I'm going to make this button longer to match our label. I'll change the width here from 125 to 146. Let's place our extended fab closer to the bottom of the screen so users can easily reach it with their thumb. I'm going to drag the button down until the bottom is 96 pixels from the bottom of the frame. Okay, what else? As I'm sure you can imagine, there's a lot more I'll add to this design. I still need to add many things like my logo, an image of a dog, and a list of available dog walkers. I'll also need to change the color of each of these elements and components, like you learned about earlier. So that's it for now. It's not a beautiful mockup, but it's a start. Keep in mind, the material kit from Google is just one of many. You can explore kits from all kinds of companies and find one that works best to utilize in your own mockups. As you practice using components from a design system in your own mockups, you'll get faster and your designs will continue to look better and better. Good luck and have fun!
Hi, I'm Shabi. I'm an interaction designer at Google. I design digital experiences for people just like you by understanding your needs and people with disabilities. Because I work in design systems, I work at the component level, so I really have to understand how people with disabilities interact with buttons and other features within your interface. And in order to do that, you really have to understand the assistive technologies that they're using and actually engage with people who have disabilities. Assistive technology really helps augment one's ability by creating an interaction between your interface and then the technology that they're using. So to ground this a bit, there's something called a screen reader, which typically helps someone who has limited vision. And what it will do is read aloud the content on the screen. And this could be also reading aloud the different types of interactive elements. When someone is using a screen reader, they might hear cancel button, and that'll help them understand the purpose or role of that interactive element. The advice I'd give someone who's interested in designing for accessibility is to reach out to your local communities. There are tons of independent living facilities. You have friends and family who may or may not have a disability. It's really about getting the conversation going and showing that you care by putting yourself out there. And that's exactly what I did when I was still learning and trying to create my own projects for people with disabilities. I think some of the frustrations that I experience when designing for accessibility, especially when this is a collaborative effort, is oftentimes accessibility is a patchwork solution. You might think of it at the end because your product needs to launch, and therefore you want to meet certain guidelines that are expected. However, it shouldn't be that way. You should be considering people with disabilities up front, because oftentimes when you design with them first, you extend that solution to a lot more people. Accessibility is important because it creates an equitable experience for one who would normally not have one.
You did it! You've completed another part of the course. How does it feel? Let's quickly recap all that you've just learned. You took your first step into the world of design systems. You also learned about the benefits of using a design system, like creating consistency for designers and users, reinforcing a company's brand identity, and saving time and money. Then, you explored the design systems of two companies, Google and Shopify. You saw the wide range of elements, components, themes, and guides that these systems offer for free. Next, you used a design system library in Figma. Finally, you learned how to use and set up a sticker sheet. Coming up next, let's talk about feedback. As a UX designer, it's important to know how to give and receive critiques. This feedback is a critical part of improving your designs. Meet you there. Hi there. So far, you've learned how to create and refine mockups, and how design systems can help you make more consistent design decisions. In this part of the course, we'll explore giving and receiving feedback. As a UX designer, you'll be expected to give and receive feedback a lot, so it's important to master this skill. Next, you'll learn about design critique sessions, where UX designers ask for feedback on their work from team members. You'll also have a chance to watch part of a mock design critique session in action. Finally, you'll get a feel for how you can turn feedback from the design critique session into concrete actions. You'll use these actions to improve your designs. I'll even show you how I've iterated on the dog walker app based on feedback I've received. So, let's get started. Welcome back. In this video, you'll learn about giving and receiving feedback on your designs. Anytime you share your work, you should always be ready to receive feedback from team members. Feedback means asking for or receiving ideas about what is or isn't working. Good feedback helps to come up with new questions or ideas that you might not have thought about before. This can help you find ways to improve your work. Earlier in the certificate program, you learned about self-reflection. It's important for UX designers to understand their personal values and any biases they might have because of the influence it can have on your designs. In the same way, it's a good idea to reflect on how much feedback you are giving and receiving at each stage of a project. You might ask yourself, am I comfortable sharing my opinions about another designer's project? And, am I checking in regularly with team members to get feedback on my designs? If the answer is yes to both of these questions, then you're off to a great start. There's lots of advantages to asking for design feedback regularly. First, feedback helps you improve your designs and become a better designer. Your teammates can offer ideas or suggestions that you might not have considered before. Second, feedback can build your confidence and skills. Getting continual feedback helps build your confidence because you'll recognize how you've improved over time. And the more feedback you get, the more you will improve your skills. Finally, feedback helps broaden your perspective as a designer. Ideally, you'll work with people with different sets of skills and backgrounds, and they will be able to identify opportunities for you to improve your design that you may have missed. Receiving feedback from a diverse audience is the goal, because our personal biases inform what we create. New perspectives can help mitigate bias in your design and offer additional ways to solve for challenges. It can also help you consider experiences unique to users other than those you initially imagined. I like to think of feedback as a gift, because it helps me think more deeply and broadly about my designs. Of course, receiving feedback about your work can be difficult at times, but it's a critical part of the design iteration process. Keep in mind, you won't always be the one receiving feedback. Sometimes you give the feedback, and giving feedback can also be difficult. Let me share a few tips on how to give great feedback as a UX designer. First, when giving feedback, it should be adjusted for each situation. Think about the role of the person you're giving feedback to, whether they're an engineer, project manager, or fellow designer. You should also think about the experience level of the person you're giving feedback to, whether they're a fellow newbie like you or more senior. Second, you should have a reason to support your feedback. For example, if you give feedback about a specific part of a project that you feel isn't working, you should be ready to explain why you think it isn't working. Broad feedback such as, "I don't like the color you chose," is not helpful. On the other hand, if you share, "I don't like the color you chose because it's not accessible," then you're explaining your reasoning and providing the designer an actionable improvement. Third, you should describe problems with the design, not offer solutions. As a designer, it may be tempting to provide advice on how you think the design should look or feel. But put yourself in the other person's shoes. Would you want another designer telling you how to fix things? Or would you want an opportunity to take their feedback, process it, and come up with your own solutions to the problems? These 3 suggestions are just the beginning. You can learn many more tips for giving feedback in the course reading. One more thing, before you go off into the real world and have to give and receive feedback. Let me tell you a little bit about my own journey with feedback in my career. The first time I received design critiques was in architecture school. Often, I felt defensive and uncomfortable when I had to present my work to professors or peers. I also felt frustrated when I'd incorporate their feedback only to have my decisions questioned again in the next round of feedback. With practice, time, and reflection, I started to value the critiques and understand that I didn't always have to follow all the feedback or advice. Most importantly, I became more confident in my own design decisions. In my current role as an interaction designer, I asked for feedback early in the process and as often as possible. Feedback has helped me learn from colleagues and improve my work over time. I hope feedback will do the same for you. As you might have noticed, in the world of UX design, we give a lot of feedback. Coming up, we'll discuss a method of giving feedback frequently used in UX design called design critiques. Hello. Last time, we explored how feedback offers fresh perspectives that can help you improve your designs. Now, let's discuss a common type of feedback activity for UX designers. It's called a design critique session. A design critique session is a planned period of time where UX designers present their work to team members and listen to feedback. Design critiques are also a great opportunity for you to practice giving feedback to other team members. These sessions are a chance for many people to come together to exchange ideas and make a collective choice on a design direction, in person or remotely. When you hear the phrase design critique session, you might picture yourself showing up in front of a group of people and waiting to receive comments about your performance. You might even imagine defending yourself from an army of team members. Fortunately, that's not the case. If design critique sessions are planned with clear objectives and good preparation, they can be very useful. Plus, they can even improve the ways you and your team work together in the future. So, what does a crit session look like in the real world? Let's start with the participants. In a design critique, participants can play one of 3 main roles: facilitator, presenter, or reviewer. First, there's the facilitator. Their job is to run the crit session and guide the process. They might also monitor the time and make sure that the objectives are being followed. On top of that, they'll make sure that everyone's voice is included and that there's enough time for all ideas to be shared. Keep in mind, not every design critique needs to be run by a facilitator. The second role is the presenter. This is the designer who is sharing their work with others in the session. If you're the presenter, you need to prepare beforehand, be actively engaged, and be ready to ask questions for clarification after feedback is given. The final role is the reviewer or critic. The reviewer gives feedback about the design and offers clear actions to take. There is usually more than one reviewer in a design critique. At some point in your UX design career, you'll have an opportunity to be in each of these roles. That's why it's important to know how all 3 of the roles work together during a design critique. One more thing. There might sometimes be a 4th role, a note taker. This person can capture all of the ideas and feedback from the reviewers, so that the presenter can stay fully present and focused. So, how do these roles work together in a crit session? There's not one right way, and a design critique session can follow lots of different structures. To give you an idea, Here is one structure that a design critique session might follow. First, the facilitator provides an overview of the design critique session and defines the objectives. The objectives tell the participants the goals of the design critique. Ideally, objectives are specific and time-bound. For example, the objective of a design critique session might be to get initial feedback on the mockups for the booking process in our dog walker app. Next, the presenter shares their design work. As they present their designs, reviewers begin to jot down their feedback in the form of questions, ideas, likes, or challenges. After that, the facilitator lets the reviewers take turns explaining their feedback. At this time, the presenter can ask clarifying questions and thoughtfully respond to the feedback. Finally, the facilitator wraps up the crit session. Part of the wrap-up includes the facilitator asking any questions tied to the objectives that may not have already been covered. All right, now you know the different roles you might have in a critique session and how a design critique session should be structured. Up next, we'll discuss making the most of a critique session when you are presenting your own designs. A design critique session can't happen without a presenter to share their work. In this video, we'll focus on making the most of a crit session when you're the presenter. As the presenter, preparation is key. You're responsible for creating a brief presentation to share with everyone who's attending the crit session. The most important part of this presentation is the design itself. When you prepare your presentation for the design critique session, you should be ready to discuss the thinking behind any of your design decisions. It can be helpful to focus on these 5 questions. Who are you designing for? What problem are you trying to solve? How are your designs solving or not solving these problems? Where in the design process are you? And what aspects of your designs are you seeking feedback on? Thinking critically about these questions will help you remember the most important aspects of your design to focus on when presenting. These questions will also help the reviewers stay focused on the areas that you need feedback on. One more thing you need to keep in mind as you prepare to present. You need to provide reviewers with enough information to give feedback on. You also need to keep in mind how long the session will be and if the reviewers will have enough time to understand your designs. If you have a complex prototype, you may want to send it to reviewers in advance of the session. Okay, so you're fully prepared for the presentation. Now, it's time for the crit session itself. Let's explore a few best practices for presenters during a crit session. First, take in the feedback and decide if you want to ask for clarification or respond. You'll also have time after the session to think about how and when to take action based on the feedback you received. Second, it's important to focus on active listening. It's not easy to hear comments about things that we're not doing right. You might even become defensive or want to give an explanation. Instead, you should focus on listening and asking questions to help better understand the reviewer's point of view. Finally, you should be ready to take action on the feedback after the session. In most design critique sessions, there can be multiple reviewers and multiple parts of your design that they're critiquing. So be prepared to receive lots of comments. After you have a chance to think about all of the feedback you've received, you can decide if your design will stay the course or change direction. Think of your work as a boat, and you're the captain. In a design critique session, the feedback helps you understand if the boat's moving in the right direction, or if you need to change direction in small or big ways. As a new designer, critique sessions helped me identify different perspectives to consider design problems from. They also helped me learn new skills and develop my own critical eye for design. Regular feedback is a key part of every designer's process. Feedback has helped me improve my work, as well as my personal skills. Okay, you now understand how a design critique session works and the role the presenter plays. Let's keep learning about critique sessions. Hi, I'm Kunal. I'm a staff interaction designer at Google. I work on the material design team at Google. Material design is a public open source design system that many companies around the world use to create high quality apps for Android, the web, and other platforms. I've played a number of roles on the team. So I started out kind of working on our core design guidelines and system, helping define and provide guidance for the components that people use every day to design and build high-quality apps. Right now, I lead design for our public website, material.io, which is where you can find all the information and resources about our design system that you need to get started. A critique session is basically just you presenting your work to peers for feedback. So think about like when you go shopping and you want to show off an outfit to friends, if you're considering buying it or not, and they may have some feedback for you like, nah, that doesn't really look that good, or, oh yeah, that looks really good on you. It's just that same kind of idea, but with your design work instead. You're just presenting it, explaining what you like about it, what you don't like about it, what you might have questions on, and then getting feedback from your peers about what they think, what is or isn't working. Critiques are important because they give you a chance to really improve upon the work. It's easy to get lost in the specific assignment you've been given and maybe lose focus on what goals you're trying to reach and maybe how your work fits into a broader journey, whether you're working on a feature that's part of a larger product or you're not considering what the rest of a user's day or task might look like. Other people coming in can help bring that fresh perspective to you and make sure you're not getting too stuck in the details of your own work. In a critique session, there's not really a distinction between being entry level or senior. At some point, everyone is going to have work that they want to put in front of their peers for feedback. So you're going to be expected to play the same roles as a presenter or as a reviewer, and just be thoughtful about how you're presenting and how you're giving feedback. As a presenter, one of the hardest things to do in a critique is keep people focused on the specific things you want feedback on. Oftentimes, people will want to start reviewing other parts of the designs, other parts of the product. It's easy for discussions to kind of go off the rails. So as much as possible, I try to keep the discussion focused on the task at hand. When I'm a reviewer, before I give someone feedback, I always want to make sure I have a way to connect it to some broader point. I want to provide the right framing for my feedback. So I always want to make sure that I'm not leaving someone with just my subjective opinion, but even if I have a subjective opinion, I'm attaching it to something that they can find useful to anchor to. When you're talking about what makes the work better, part of what you're doing is also talking about what can make you better as a designer. You can learn from the types of feedback you're receiving about things to maybe improve upon in the future, things you can start looking for on your own. So all those details that came up in a critique session, I internalized and thought about how to apply to my own process. Crits have been a big part of how I've grown as a designer. Welcome back. We're moments away from checking out an example of a crit session in action. A standard design critique session is at least 30 minutes, and the designer usually spends 5 to 10 of those minutes presenting. But keep in mind, the session length will depend on the amount of feedback requested and the number of reviewers involved. We don't have time to share a full crit session with you, so the upcoming video is just a snapshot of what usually happens. In the mock crit session, I'll play the role of the presenter, sharing some of the mockups for the dog walker app with 2 colleagues, who are the reviewers. There will also be a facilitator guiding the flow of the interaction. While you've been working on your mockups throughout this course, so have I. The mockups I'll present in the design critique session are my current iteration of the dog walker app. As the presenter, I'll ask for feedback on 2 parts of this design: the scheduling flow and the call to action buttons. Remember, call to action buttons are elements in a design that tell the user to take action. In the dog walker app, the call to action buttons are labeled things like book appointment and next. You'll have a chance to watch how the flow of ideas and communication happens as I present my work and receive feedback. As you watch, take note of how I, as the presenter, respond to the feedback I'm receiving. Ask yourself, is the presenter actively listening? Is the presenter taking notes? What types of follow-up questions is the presenter asking? You should also focus on the way that reviewers share their feedback and opinions. Ask yourself, do the reviewers share the reasoning behind their feedback? Do the reviewers focus on problems with the design instead of offering solutions? Do the reviewers connect their feedback to the objectives of the design critique session? With these questions in mind, Let's join the crit session. Meet you there.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining the design critique today. I'm Michael, and today Kunal is presenting his designs for the Dog Walker app, and he has some questions about the core flow. For the reviewers, please feel free to take notes while Kunal is presenting, and please save your questions until the end of the presentation. Go ahead, Kunal.
Thanks, Michael. I'd like to present the current state to you all and get your feedback, especially about the call to action buttons and scheduling flow. So let's start going through the scheduling flow. Here on the home screen, the main call to action is to book an appointment. I thought about placing it inside the hero, but I like the idea of having the button divide that space from the nearby dog walkers. Tapping the button opens up the scheduling flow. And to make it clear to users that there's a sequence of steps to go through, I've added a stepper or progress tracker with 3 icons across the top of the screen. Also, I wanted large, rounded call to action buttons on every page of the app. I tried to keep that style consistent for all of the buttons. Okay, back to the scheduling flow. The first step is to set up the appointment details. There's a number of things to input here, like the date, time, and duration, as well as selecting which dogs are being walked. For the UI design, I chose a carousel menu that the user can scroll through to decide the date, time, and length of the walk for their dog. I've also added an option to make this a recurring appointment, but I'm still working through designing the screens for that step. You can probably tell that I chose the same rounded buttons with the same orange color to book appointments, advance to the next screen while booking, and finally to book the appointment. I also made the choice to have the date, dog walker, and confirm icons in the same color too. As each one of these steps is completed, that icon turns to orange in a circle. These are the steps of the user journey within the app so far. Thank you.
Thank you, Kunal, for presenting your designs. Shabi and Salvador, do you guys have any questions?
Thank you, Kunal. My first thought is that I like the flow of the pages, and I noticed that there's an option for choosing recurring sessions. But in the second panel, are we using language that appeals to the most users? How about something like which dog is being walked instead of who is going for a walk?
I agree. And what if the user has more than one dog, but those dogs have separate walking schedules? I know that my dog Ranger is not very social, so I would like to have him go for a walk alone instead of with other dogs. Is this a feature that we can build into the app? It seems like at this point, the app only serves one type of user.
Thank you. Those are great questions and suggestions. I'll explore some different copy options and check with the team about requesting walks for solo dogs. But like you said, I'm not sure the app supports that feature right now.
Oh, and one more thing. I noticed the scheduling step lists multiple dogs, and some of the language seems to imply this too. For example, the homepage uses the phrase, "we can take them for a walk." So I'm wondering how a single dog view could be incorporated into the app design. I'm also wondering if we will actually need the list of dog names to select from for users who only have a single dog.
That's a great question, Salvador. I'll go back to the mockup later and find out if I can make any changes to the interface to support users with one dog. That seems like a pretty common situation for a lot of our potential users.
Great. Thank you, Kunal, for presenting those points. We've heard a lot about the scheduling flow, so let's move on to the call to action buttons. Or maybe, do you have some questions for the reviewers, Kunal?
Thanks. No, I don't have any questions for now. So as I explained earlier, we decided to go with the color orange for the call to action buttons. I'd like to get your impression about the overall button styles.
I like the choice of the rounded buttons, but what was your reasoning behind the decision to use orange for the call to action buttons? And does this shade of orange affect the accessibility for the user? There's also a whole lot of orange on some of the pages. So I'm also wondering, since orange is a color for the main call to action buttons, should we simplify the date, dog walker, and confirmation icons across the top of the pages? Maybe you could change the color of those to gray or something more neutral instead of orange.
Good questions. I chose a medium shade of orange based on the color guide set up in the design system. In terms of accessibility, I will have to investigate the color contrast. I'll be sure to make any necessary changes to the color palette to make it accessible for all users.
Thank you, Kunal. Any other questions before we go on?
I have one more question. The placement and width for the main call to action buttons seem to change on the pages throughout the scheduling flow. Does changing the position and size of the buttons create distractions for the user?
We scale the buttons to emphasize them, and then we change the size of the buttons on each panel to be in proportion with the other buttons on the page. So these changes shouldn't interrupt the flow.
Okay, thanks for that, Kunal. Would either of you like to add anything else before we continue?
I like the choice of white for the text and a call to action buttons, but maybe you should consider.
Welcome back. You just watched part of a design critique session. What did you think? I hope you're able to learn how UX designers, like me, present work and receive feedback. You also got a chance to observe how reviewers provide feedback in this critique session format. In this video, we'll discuss what happens after a design critique session. If you are the presenter, like I was, it's time to process all of the feedback from reviewers. The goal is to decide which suggestions to incorporate or not, and work on generating action items. Start by reviewing the notes that you, or a note taker, took during the critique session. As you review the notes, it's also helpful to take some time to really think about the feedback you received. Ask yourself, how can I synthesize the feedback from the design critique session? Then, what feedback do I want to take action on to improve my designs or the user experience? So, let's evaluate the feedback I received and identify some actions I might want to take to improve my work. As we go along, I might also think of some follow-up questions for the reviewers to clarify the feedback they provided. I'm going to pull up the designs I presented to Shabi and Salvador on the Schedule a Dog Walker user flow. I'm also going to review my notes to remind myself of the feedback they provided. One thing to keep in mind: since there were only 2 reviewers in this critique session, there's less synthesis that I need to do. Remember when you synthesized participant feedback from the usability study in an earlier course with Jason? In the same way, if you have multiple reviewers in a large design critique session, you will probably need to synthesize the feedback and identify themes. In this case, since I only have 2 reviewers, I'll get started with the first note I took. Oh yes, I remember this one. Shabi recommended changing the wording of the question the user is asked when choosing which dog will be walked. This feedback from Shabi wasn't supported by any specific design principles. Shabi also didn't explain how changing this question would impact the user experience or the functionality of the app. With this in mind, I'm going to interpret this piece of feedback as a suggestion that's nice to have, but not something I must fix. So for this piece of feedback, I'm going to say there's no action needed. Now, let's move on to the next piece of feedback in my notes. This one's from Salvador about the same part of the design. Salvador shared a useful perspective about users who have dogs with different walking schedules or need to go for a walk alone. To figure out if I should implement this suggestion, I'll need to talk to the product manager and my teammate in operations. Their insights about whether or not this option is practical will help guide any iterations of the design. Keep in mind, this happens a lot during critique sessions. You might get feedback that impacts more than just the design. So, the action item here is to email the product manager I work with in order to set up a meeting and determine if this is a change we want to implement. On to the next one. Salvador asked what the experience would entail if the user has only one dog. Salvador's question is useful because it's user-centered and aimed at creating options for a possible solution. We expect the app to support users with 1 or more dogs, so I probably need to create more screens to understand the user flow for single dog owners. I'll take an action item to create more screens for the dog selection part of the user flow. Okay, let's go on to the next point I recorded during the critique session. Salvador asked about the different sizes of the call to action buttons. I'll use this as an opportunity to check the size specifications of my mockups in Figma. In this case, there are 2 actions I need to take. First, I want to check all of my mockups to make sure the buttons are the same height and width. And second, I will review the placement of the buttons across all of the screens I've created. On to the next piece of feedback. Shabi had 2 comments. To address this feedback, I'll need to spend some time iterating on the icon design and the accompanying text labels that are shown across the top of the screen. This is also a place where I have a follow-up question for Shabi to clarify the feedback she provided. I want to ask if she meant simplifying the colors of the icons, or the text labels beneath the icons, or both. And the next piece of feedback I wrote down was from Shabi too. It was about the shade of orange I used in the call to action buttons. She asked whether or not the color is accessible. This is really important feedback. I need to make sure that my designs work for all users with various abilities. Based on this feedback, I need to check if the color contrast passes accessibility standards. If the orange on the white background is not accessible, I will need to change the color of the buttons and icons that I used throughout the booking flow. For example, I might need to change to a darker shade of orange. Alright, those are all of the notes I captured from the design critique session. These are just a few examples of the many types of interactions that can happen between reviewers and the designer who is presenting. Over time, you'll gain more and more confidence with the process of receiving or giving feedback. You'll also develop more strategies about how to take useful feedback and generate action items to keep improving your design. Coming up, we'll cover some of the steps involved in integrating these action items into your mockups in Figma. Meet you there. Welcome back. Earlier, you checked out an example design critique session. Then, we discussed some strategies about how to take feedback and use it to generate action items to improve your designs. In this video, I'll use the feedback from the design critique to make a few updates to my mockups. As a reminder, here are the 5 items I decided to take action on. Create more screens for the dog selection part of the user flow. Make sure the buttons are the same heights and widths. Review the placement of the buttons. Iterate on icon design across the top of the screen. And check if the color contrast passes accessibility standards. Let's get started with the first action item, which is creating more screens for the dog selection part of the user flow. As you might remember, Salvador asked what the user experience would entail if the user has only one dog. To address this, I iterated on my designs right away. I created alternative versions of a few screens that show the user flow for single dog owners. Let me show you one of them. Before, on the book appointment screen, there were 3 dog names listed, and the user had to select at least one. Now, my new additional screens, like this one, show only one dog name, and it's automatically selected. This will save the user time. Now, on to the second action item. Make sure the buttons are the same heights and widths. I did a detailed check of every button of the Schedule a Dog Walker user flow in Figma. Almost all of the buttons were the same heights and widths, except for one, so I made a quick adjustment. The third action item was to review the placement of the buttons. The good news is that all of my related buttons, like the next button, were already at the same X and Y axis of the grid. You might be wondering how I check this. To check for placement in Figma, I can click on a button, like the next button, and check the right side panel to see where it's positioned on the screen. The next button should have an X value of 16 and Y value of 8 to indicate that the button is in the same place across screens. The fourth action item was to iterate on the 3 icon designs across the top of the screen. Shabi suggested that I review these icons because it looked a bit busy. I did a few rounds of iteration on this part of my mockup to figure out how to address this feedback. Keep in mind that some of the feedback you might receive can take time to implement in your designs, but that's just part of the process. In the earlier version of my design, the 3 icons across the top of the screen were each surrounded by a circle and had accompanying text labels beneath them. Now, the icons stand alone without circles and without accompanying text labels. This new iteration of my design looks cleaner and less busy. Finally, the fifth action item was to check the shade of orange that's used throughout my design to see if the color contrast passes accessibility standards. WebAIM, which stands for Web Accessibility in Mind, allows you to check the contrast between 2 colors and compare them against WCAG, or the Web Content Accessibility Guideline Standards. After checking the color contrast on WebAIM, I decided to use a darker shade of orange for the color palette in my app. This darker shade passes AAA accessibility, so it's a more inclusive choice for app users. The suggested hex value for the updated orange is D53E0B. I'll make this change to the buttons in all screens of my mockup. For example, you can see the change in the color from a lighter shade of orange to a darker shade on the buttons here. I'll also change the color to this darker shade of orange in my sticker sheet. To save myself time in the future, I'll update the color of the buttons, icons, the review stars, and text. Here's a pro tip. You don't need to change the color of each button individually. If you hold and drag your cursor to select all of the buttons and icons in the sticker sheet, you can simply change the color in the right side panel. Look for the header called Selection Colors and edit your style color. Okay, we've made it through the 5 action items from the design critique session feedback. And with that, you've learned how to take feedback from a design critique session and use it to make practical changes to your designs in Figma. Now it's your turn to iterate on your own mockups based on feedback. Hello again. You've just finished learning all about design critique sessions. You should now understand how feedback is a powerful tool for gaining insights about your designs at different stages of a project, and how feedback can help you continue to iterate on your designs. As a UX designer, one common way to give and receive feedback is through a design critique session. You watched one in action where you saw me receive feedback on my designs for the dog walker app. The more practice you have with design critiques, the more comfortable you'll be with the process of receiving critiques on your own designs and offering your opinion about someone else's designs. Finally, you learned how to turn feedback from a design critique session into concrete actions. You even got feedback about your own designs and took actions to make improvements. Coming up, we'll explore the steps to create high-fidelity prototypes and add elements like gesture and motion to your designs. Let's keep iterating on our designs together. Hi everyone, and welcome back. So far, you've learned about visual design elements and principles, explored design systems, and iterated on your mockups. You've been working hard in each stage of the design process up until this point, and it's time to move even closer to your final designs. This part of the course is all about high-fidelity prototypes. I'll start by defining high-fidelity prototypes, and we'll create a high-fidelity prototype in Figma. Following 6 steps, we'll turn the mockups you've been working on into prototypes that are ready for testing. In addition, we'll explore 2 new concepts, gestures and motion, which can help enrich the user experience and increase usability. Finally, Shabi will share a few things to keep in mind to ensure your designs are accessible when it comes to gestures and motion. I hope you're feeling energized because all of your work is coming together and you're moving closer to a final product. So let's get started. Hello. You've spent most of this course building your mockups, and now it's time to turn them into a high-fidelity prototype. As you learned earlier in this certificate program, a prototype is an early model of a product that demonstrates functionality. So what's the difference between low-fidelity and high-fidelity prototypes? Low-fidelity prototypes are interactive versions of designs that use content placeholders. On the other hand, high-fidelity prototypes are detailed, interactive versions of designs that closely match the look and feel of the final product. Essentially, a high-fidelity prototype takes the design work you've already done in the mockups and makes it interactive. Remember that mockups focus on visual design, but prototypes focus on functionality. A high-fidelity prototype must have these 3 pieces: visual elements, like color, images, icons, and typography; navigation, to help users move between screens; and interaction, like gestures and motion, which make the prototype function. First, you'll need to finalize all of the visual elements within the prototype. Basically, this means confirming any written content, illustrations, graphics, and external links that will be part of the final product. In an ideal world, you'll coordinate with other members of your team to make sure you have realistic pieces of content to include in your high-fidelity prototype. But in the real world, you might need to design with placeholders if something isn't ready. Think about this screen of the dog walker app. On the left, the low-fidelity prototype used lines as placeholders for names. You might also use placeholder text like first name, last name, or dog walker A in a low-fidelity prototype. On the right, the high-fidelity prototype includes actual names and descriptions instead of placeholders. The goal is to have realistic names and profile photos to simulate the real app experience. The second part of high-fidelity prototypes that you'll need to finalize is the navigation for the user flow you want to test. Your low-fidelity prototypes should have already taken into account the critical user journey, also known as the main user flow. Navigation is important because it helps users explore and enjoy your product. Without a good navigation system in place, users will struggle or even stop using your product. So, check that you have the right buttons or icons on each screen, like back arrows and X's, to allow navigation to happen. When checking the navigation in a high-fidelity prototype, ask yourself these questions. How does a user get from one screen to the next? How easy is it to locate navigation-related icons, like back arrows? And at what point does a user journey end? Finally, a high-fidelity prototype needs interactivity. Remember how you connected each screen of the low-fidelity prototype? Now, you need to add interaction between each screen again, using your new high-fidelity designs. As a reminder, interactivity makes the prototype function. Let's revisit how to make something interactive in Figma, also known as making a connection. To create a connection, first select the item you want to be the hotspot. This is where the user's interaction will take place. You can create a hotspot on anything, like a button, icon, or heading. Second, make the connection. This is the arrow, or noodle, that connects the hotspot to the destination. You can make a connection by clicking the little blue plus sign inside the circle. Finally, indicate the destination. This is where a connection ends. Remember, the destination has to be a frame or screen. It cannot be an item within the frame. Once you have these connections, you can add the interaction and animation. Interaction and animation includes things like gestures and motion. We'll focus on gestures and motion in this part of the course, so stay tuned for more. Okay, you're starting to understand everything that goes into a high-fidelity prototype, so it's time to learn how to create one yourself. Coming up, we'll start working on a high-fidelity prototype in Figma. Let's get going. Welcome back. There are 6 steps to create a high-fidelity prototype in Figma. Those 6 steps are: lay out the mockups, connect the screens, add interaction details, adjust the animation, complete for all screens, and share your work. In this video, we'll focus on the first 2. We'll cover the other 4 later. Before we get started, I'm going to open up Figma so you can follow along with each step. Here's a quick pro tip. You can create your high-fidelity prototype inside of the same file as all of your existing designs, like your wireframes and mockups. I'll simply create a new page. All right, you're ready to get started with step 1, lay out the mockups. First, I'm going to copy and paste my mockups into the Hi-Fi prototype page. As you might have noticed, we've been designing the screens of the Dog Walker app in the order that the user would move through the app. We started with the home screen, then designed the choose a date and time screens. Next, we created the select Dog Walker screens. And finally, we added the booking confirmation screen. At this point in the design process, you should have already considered the user flow through your own app too. If you haven't ordered your screens based on the user flow, take time now to do so. All right, you're now ready for step 2, which is connecting the screens. Remember from the last video, to create a connection, you first need to select the item you want to be the hotspot. Then, make the connection using the arrow. And finally, indicate the destination where the connection ends. Let me show you. I'll connect the Book Appointment button on the home page with the first Book Appointment screen. To do that, I'll select the Book Appointment button on the home page to be the hotspot. I need to check that I'm in prototype mode on the right side panel. Seems like I'm still in design mode. I'm going to click on Prototype at the top of the right side panel to switch. Did you notice how this new blue circle appeared on the book appointment button when I switched to prototype mode? This is how I'll make the connection. When I hover over the blue circle, I get this plus sign in the middle of the right side of the button. We call the blue circle with the plus sign a prototype node, or just a node for short. When I click on the node and drag, an arrow appears. I drag the arrow from the book appointment button on the home page to the frame I want to connect to, which is the first book appointment screen. This will be the destination. Keep in mind that the first connection you make will be the starting frame for your prototype. This is why it's important to have your screens laid out in the order of the user flow, and for the first connection you make to be the first action you'd want a user to take in your prototype. From here, I'll continue to work my way through the rest of the screens in my app, making additional connections. All right, we've covered the first two steps to create a hi-fi prototype in Figma. Lay out the mockup and connect the screens. Now it's your turn to try out these steps on your own designs. We'll cover the other 4 steps soon. Good luck! Welcome back. Before you learn about the additional steps to create a high-fidelity prototype in Figma, I want to introduce you to 2 concepts, gestures and motion. Let's start with some quick definitions. A gesture is any method of interaction a user has with information on their device using touch. The most common gestures are tapping, scrolling, swiping, and zooming. Motion is a way to animate static design elements to focus the user's attention and tell stories. Another way to think about this is motion helps a user understand subtle changes that take place on screen by adding an animation. For example, when you make an online purchase on a mobile device, you usually tap on a button to add the item to your cart. If the cart icon changes state without any animation, you may not notice the change. But if the cart icon animates as it changes state, your attention gets drawn to the cart, and you are automatically provided feedback that an action occurred. In this example, the tap is the gesture, and the motion is the animation that takes place after the Add to Cart button is tapped. Let's check out a second common gesture, swipe. Have you ever read an ebook and swiped your finger across the screen to flip to the next page of the book? In this case, swipe is the gesture. The motion is the animation that takes place after you swipe. The key takeaway is that gestures and motion help enrich the user experience and increase usability. So far, the prototype we've created is pretty static, as we've connected the screens without adding any animations. Coming up next, I'll show you how to enrich the user experience using motion and gestures. Let's get to it. Hi again. Ready to cover the next 4 steps to create a high-fidelity prototype in Figma? As a refresher, the 6 steps to create a high-fidelity prototype are lay out the mockups, connect the screens, add interaction details, adjust the animation, complete for all screens, and share your work. We already learned how to lay out the mockups and connect the screens. Now it's on to step 3, which is adding interaction details. After connecting 2 screens, it's time to customize the interaction details. Before we get started, I'm going to open up Figma so you can follow along with each step. There are 3 parts of an interaction to explore. First is the trigger. The trigger defines what type of interaction will cause the prototype to advance forward. The trigger could be a mouse click, touch gesture, or the time elapsed in the current frame. In Figma, the trigger is the first drop-down menu listed on the Interaction Details panel. For the Book Appointment button on the home page, I'll select the trigger called OnClick, OnTap, which means the prototype will advance forward when a user clicks or taps the button. The second part of an interaction is the action. The action defines what happens when the user interacts with the hotspot. This could mean moving to another frame or opening a link. There are 6 actions to choose from in Figma. For this example, I'll select Navigate to from the drop-down menu. This action takes users from one frame in a prototype to the next. Navigate to is the most common type of action to use when moving between entire screens. The last part of an interaction is the destination. The destination could be another screen in the prototype or an overlay that appears above the current screen. In this example, After a user clicks the Book Appointment button, I want the destination to be the first book appointment screen. All right, we finished step 3 of creating a high-fidelity prototype in Figma, which was adding interaction details. Now it's time for step 4, which is adjusting the animation. The animation settings determine how the prototype moves from one screen to the other. This is how I can add motion to the prototype. Figma has 8 animations you can choose from. For example, if I select Instant as the animation, the user will go from one screen to the next without any motion or transition in between. Let's take a moment to check out how this works in the prototype. First, I'll hit the Present icon next to the Share button in the top right of Figma. That will open up a new tab. If I click on the Book Appointment button in the homepage of the prototype, our app will instantly move to the first book appointment screen. Now that I've seen this animation in action, I'm not sure that I like the instant animation because it feels jarring. So let me try changing this animation to slide in instead. For this animation, I also need to select the direction that the page will slide in from. I'll select the up arrow because I want the page to slide in from the bottom of the screen up toward the top of the screen. The arrow points in the direction that the screen will slide. Then I'll test it out again. I'll hit the Present button one more time and see how the slide in animation looks. Great! I like the slide in animation because it's smoother and more natural. One more thing. Gestures in motion can really help users with wayfinding. I've just shown you how to make the book appointment screen open. Now I need to add the motion that will happen when a user closes this screen in order to return to the homepage. I want these two motions to feel similar so that it's easy for users to navigate through the app. To go back to the home screen, users will tap the X in the upper right corner of the book appointment screen. I'll start by connecting the X to the homepage. I'll click the X, select the node, and drag the arrow to the left to connect it to the homepage. Great! The interaction detail panel has popped up. I'll keep the trigger as on-click, on-tap. Instead, I'll focus on the animation. When the user closes the book appointment screen, I want the animation to be the opposite of when the user opens the screen. So I'll select Slide Out instead of Slide In, and the down arrow instead of the up arrow. Let me test my prototype one more time using the Present button. I'll click the Book Appointment button, and the second screen slides up. Then, if I click the X to return to the homepage, the screen slides down. You will probably play around with your prototype in Figma like this quite a bit. You'll test out lots of options for interactions and animations until you land on the one that looks and feels right to you. This is part of the fun in the prototyping process. And with that, I've added gesture and motion to the high-fidelity prototype. I will continue adding gestures and motion for each screen of the prototype, just like I did for this screen, in order to finish the user flow. Once I've finished creating all of the interactions and my prototype is looking good, I can share my work with others. Let me show you. If I click on the Share button in the top right of the screen, I can select people to view or edit my file in Figma. All right, that's it. You now know the basics of how to create a high-fidelity prototype in Figma. It's your turn to transform your mockups into a high-fidelity prototype for your own project.
Hello again, it's me, Shabi. I'm back to share some more tips about making your designs accessible. Adding motion to designs brings up new considerations to make sure your products are accessible to all users. In this video, we'll explore a few things to keep in mind to ensure your designs are accessible when it comes to gestures and motion. First, you should always provide alternative options to using gestures. Gestures are a specific action that many groups of people might not be able to use. For example, some users might not have complete control of their hands or be able to see the screen, which can make some gestures difficult. The best accessibility principle to follow is to make sure that a gesture is not the only way to complete a task. A gesture should just be one option. For example, in Gmail, you can swipe left to archive an email, but that isn't the only way to get rid of an email. You can also select the archive button. Second, think critically about the speed and duration of motion in your designs. Very fast motion can be disturbing and alarming to people. In addition, motion that goes on for too long can be distracting and can create confusion. The World Wide Web Consortium, also called W3C, recommends that animations are under 5 seconds long in order to be accessible. In Figma, you'll time motion by the millisecond. This means your transitions and other motion should be between 150 and 500 milliseconds. Finally, give users the ability to turn off a motion. As you step into the world of UX design, it's important to design for users by ensuring that the motion in your designs is accessible. For example, looping motion has become popular recently, especially with GIFs or autoplay. But looping motion can be distracting, so you should provide users with the option to make motion loop or not. YouTube follows this practice by allowing users to toggle autoplay on or off. You should work with your product and engineering counterparts to ensure this option is included. With these 3 considerations in mind, you'll be well on your way to ensuring that your designs are inclusive to all users.
My name is Jen, and I'm the head of Google Accessibility User Experience. Myself and my team, we help other teams across Google create more accessible and usable products. We also work to create products that are based directly on the needs of people with disabilities. In accessibility, we talk a lot about assistive technologies. At the foundational level, these are tools to help people with disabilities interact with and use devices so they can participate equally. So thinking about using your phone, anytime you pinch to zoom or magnify a screen, anytime you might rely on closed captions to view a video, these are just a few examples of assistive technologies that we all use and probably take for granted as well. To design with accessibility in mind basically means that throughout the entire product development process, we're continually trying to understand and address the needs of people with disabilities. And if you take just kind of the standard product development process, there's many opportunities to do this. Let's take the beginning part where even before you're doing design work. Most likely you're out there trying to understand users' needs. You might be doing this through interviews, some foundational research, maybe market analysis. Anything you're doing to better understand user needs, this is an opportunity to make sure you're including people with disabilities in that research. And that will obviously set a clear and great foundation of new insights and needs for the team to work from. As you're going throughout the product development process and you've now done the work to understand the user's needs, you're into the design phase, right? And here again is where you have an opportunity to apply just the basic accessibility and inclusive design guidelines, which can go very, very far. So examples would include ensuring that there's good contrast for your text and imagery. If you do use any imagery of people, making sure that it's diverse and representative. And for things like the text on the screen or the content on the screen, ensuring that it's of a basic reading level so everybody can comprehend it. After that, when you're iterating on your designs, ideally, we're all trying to get user feedback as we go. And this could be done through user studies, just informal sessions to get feedback. Here's a great opportunity to ensure that whoever you're getting feedback from, you will do include people with disabilities. Even after launch, you can still continue to get amazing feedback. There's 2 things that I found over the years that are really satisfying about my job. The first is obviously seeing the end result and seeing what a positive impact an accessible product can make on people's lives. It allows people to participate in society. It allows people to hold a job. It can allow people to get an education. Like it truly can make a humongous and significant impact in a person's life. Lately, we've been trying to focus even more on doing co-design and really bringing people with disabilities and different perspectives into the full-on product development process where we can. And that opportunity to learn directly from users and get their ideas and work with them has been another significant impact in my own life and how I perceive things. Every single thing, every single design guideline that's related to accessibility truly improves the overall end result. And so in my mind, what I've just come to realize is that focusing on accessibility and practicing a more inclusive design practice is just plain good design. For me and people I talk to, I really try to push that notion that it's not anything additional, and it's not a tax or a burden. Like, this is making the end result better. This is making you better as a designer.
In the last video of our Figma for Beginners series, we created a single screen of our app. To save time, we built out the other screens in our application, including a menu, profile, and interface for searching the app. Let's create an interactive prototype to put it all together. Prototypes are a great way for us to visualize how our final app will look. They let us define pathways, explore interactions, and test out ideas before we invest in building the real thing. We can create multiple prototypes within a file and keep them organized on different pages. Let's duplicate the page of our existing designs to get started. Click on the Prototype tab in the right sidebar to switch to prototype mode. Here, we create connections between frames so users can navigate the prototype like a real application. Prototype connections are made up of 3 parts: a hotspot where the connection begins, the connection itself which stores the interaction details, and the destination. We want to create an interaction from the menu icon to the menu page. Because the menu icon is nested, we need to double-click it to select it. Once the connection node appears, click the connection icon to create an arrow and drag it over to the destination frame. Release to complete the connection. Let's create an interaction from the menu back to the home page. Select the Home text layer, click Add Connection icon, and then drag the arrow back to the home page. Currently, our connection uses the default instant interaction settings. We'll cover the specifics of these interactions a little later on. Let's see how our prototype looks so far. Click the Present icon to open it in Presentation View. At the bottom of the page, we can see we only have 2 frames in our prototype instead of all 4. Once you add at least 1 prototype connection, Figma will only include frames with connections in Presentation View. If we click on the menu icon, Figma switches to the menu frame. If we click the Home option in the menu, it switches back to the home page. Great! Now that we have the basic mechanics working, we can customize the interaction. Back in the editor, we can view other aspects of the connection in the Interaction Details menu. Here, we can select a trigger for the transition, like a tap, click, or hover, as well as the action and destination. We want users to be able to access the menu from a few places in the app, so this interaction needs to feel accessible. With the default instant animation, we lose the context of where we were in the app and how we got there. Animations guide users through flows and communicate relationships between different parts of our application. There's a few ways we could tackle this problem in Figma. We could create an overlay that makes the menu appear above our other screens, or we could use Smart Animate to reveal the menu when you drag the current screen to the right. Both approaches make our menu feel easily accessible and establishes a hierarchy that positions the menu on a different level than our other screens. This also allows us to explore some of Figma's super cool prototyping features, but they take us well off the beginner's path. To explore more, search Overlays or Smart Animate in the Figma Help Center for more information. Move In animates the menu so that it appears over the top of our existing screen. We're being shown some more information, but we don't feel like we've moved to a new location. This feels like a good fit. There are some other animation types you can explore, so give them a try. The menu icon is on the left side of our screen, so our menu should move in from the left. Click the right arrow from the Interaction Details panel to set the direction. We can also set the duration to control the speed of the transition, and use easing to make the animation feel less robotic. We won't explore these settings now, but you can learn more by searching for easing in the Figma Help Center. When we return back to the home frame, the animation should be the reverse. We'll select Move Out and choose the left pointing arrow to move the menu back out. Now we have our first set of interactions. We can access the menu from both the search and profile screens, so let's create those interactions next. The Interaction Details menu shows our last animation settings. Let's update these to match the interaction. We'll repeat this process for the profile screen. We don't need to update the animation as Figma has applied the most recent one again. We'll need to create the interactions going back from the menu to the profile page, updating the animation to match. We can only access search from the home screen. We'll create a connection from the search icon that opens the search page. We'll use the push animation to make it feel like we are moving laterally between these two screens. Tapping cancel should take us back to the home page. We'll create a connection with the push animation that moves in that direction. Now that we have a working prototype, we're ready to get some feedback from our other members of the team. We can invite them to the prototype itself. We can share our prototype with our team by sending them a link. Click the Share button in the toolbar. We'll update the link sharing settings from only people invited to the file to anyone with the link and set to Can View. Perfect. Now we can click Copy Link and share this with our team. Our team avatars will show up in the toolbar as they join. We can click on someone's avatar to observe their actions as they move through the prototype. Observation mode is great when you're running a usability test. Anyone can add feedback, suggestions, or questions to prototypes using comments. Click the comment icon to access the comment tool. Now we can click on a spot in the prototype to share our thoughts. It looks like Jenny added some questions around the other pages listed in the menu. She's also pointed out that there's no way to interact with posts on the feed. Ryan made a great observation that we're missing a back icon on the menu page, which might make it easier for users to dismiss the menu. Stella loves this photo of Yuna. If we switch back to the editor and press C to select the comment tool, we can see the comments our team made on the prototype on our frames. This allows us to collect feedback in one place, incorporate advice, and resolve any outstanding comments. As Jenny mentioned, we want a way for our users to interact with our posts. Let's add some icons to allow users to like, comment, and bookmark posts. Let's go to the Components page. Here's some components we created earlier. We've placed them in a horizontal auto layout frame and made them into a component. We can then place an instance of this component inside of our post component. When we switch back to our prototype, we can see the changes we made to the main component reflected in our instances. And because we built our feed using auto layout, our posts have adjusted accordingly. We'll finish up by incorporating Ryan's feedback. We'll drag a back icon from the Assets panel into our menu frame. We'll then switch to the Prototype tab and add an interaction to this icon. We'll also update the action to back. Users can access the menu from any page. The back action allows us to automatically return users to the previous page without having to create separate connections. We did it! We built an interactive prototype of our designs, explored animations, and incorporated feedback from our design team. In our next video, we'll prepare our file for sharing assets with our writers and developers. We'll explore creating thumbnails, navigating the file as a viewer, copying code from the Inspect panel, and exporting assets for production.
All right, you made it. Let's quickly recap what you learned in this part of the course, which was all about creating high-fidelity prototypes in Figma. First, you learned that high-fidelity prototypes should have visual elements, navigation, and interaction. You also learned how to make something interactive in Figma, which is known as making a connection. In Figma, I demoed the 6 steps to create a high-fidelity prototype. Lay out the mockups, connect the screens, add interaction details, adjust the animation, complete for all screens, and share your work. You also explored 2 new concepts, gestures and motion. As a reminder, a gesture is any method of interaction a user has with information on their device using touch. And motion is a way to animate static design elements to focus the user's attention and tell stories. Finally, Shabi shared a few things to keep in mind to ensure your designs are accessible when it comes to gestures and motion. So congratulations! You're well on your way to building a high-fidelity prototype. That is a huge accomplishment. I'll meet you in the final part of this course, which is about testing and iterating on your high-fidelity prototype. Keep up the great work. Welcome back. Now that you have a solid high-fidelity prototype, it's time to test your designs again. To get started, you'll apply your understanding of research to test your high-fidelity prototype. UX designers tend to follow similar steps no matter the level of fidelity of the design they're testing. So if you already completed the course on conducting research and testing early concepts, there's less for you to learn about the process this time. After you've tested your designs, you'll incorporate feedback to iterate on your existing prototype. It might take a few attempts to achieve your final design, but will help you figure out when your designs are in good enough shape to pass along to an engineering team to build. Then, you'll learn how to hand off designs to engineers for production. And finally, you'll turn everything you've learned about user research, ideation, wireframes, designs, and prototypes into a case study for your portfolio. If you went through the course on researching and testing with my colleague Jason, you may have already watched our videos about creating a research plan, conducting usability studies, and avoiding bias. If you'd like a refresher, I'll give you a summary in the next few videos. If not, you can move straight into the activities. Let's get started. Hi there. If you've been taking the courses of this program in order, you'll remember exploring research and usability studies in an earlier course. Since it's been a while, I thought it might be helpful to go through a quick summary of how to write a UX research plan before you start your next usability study. If this is the first course of the program that you've taken, you might want to go back and review the videos and complete the activities on conducting a usability study before you move forward. Or even if you just want a little refresher, all the videos that will be most helpful to you are linked in the course reading. Okay, let's get to it. We're ready to review the first step in a UX research study, planning the study. As a reminder, a research plan is a step-by-step examination of a group of users and their needs. A UX research plan is made up of 7 elements: the project background, the research goals, the detailed research questions, the key performance indicators, or KPIs, the methodology, the participants, and the script for the questions you'll ask study participants. Let's break those down. The project background summarizes the situation that led to the need for this research. It's basically a brief explanation about why you're doing the research, which you can give to anyone who asks. Your goal when creating the project background is to try and answer the question, what led you to conduct this research? Next, the research goals lay out what you're trying to solve with this design or what you'd like the outcomes of the research to be. The goals of your research will differ from project to project. They'll fit into one of 3 categories depending on when during the product lifecycle you conduct the research. Your research goals should answer the question, how will the results of the research impact our design decisions? After that, you'll write detailed research questions for your project. These are the questions you plan to answer during the study. The research questions should be actionable and specific, and you should avoid leading questions. But keep in mind that these should not be the literal questions you plan to ask study participants. Instead, the goal is to figure out what questions you need the study to answer. Next, determine your key performance indicators, or KPIs, which are the critical measures of progress toward an end goal. In a UX research study, you might consider KPIs like the amount of time a user spends on a task, users' use of navigation functionality versus search functionality, user error rates, drop-off rates, and conversion rates, and the system usability scale. That's a questionnaire to measure the usability of your designs. When determining KPIs for your research study, consider the question, what would indicate that we're making progress toward our ultimate goal? Next up is the methodology, where you'll outline the steps you plan to take to conduct your research, including how you'll collect and analyze data. Then, determine who your study participants will be. Who do you need to be involved in the research to ensure you're studying the right metrics? Finally, you'll need to write a script for your study. This is also known as the discussion guide. You'll need to determine what questions you want to ask participants during your research. And there you have it, the 7 elements of a UX research plan. Hopefully that brief overview refreshed your memory on how to plan a UX research study. If you need more guidance, check out the course readings and revisit the videos from the earlier course. Let's keep going. I'm back for another quick summary. Earlier, we explored how to plan a study, which is the first of 4 steps in the UX research study process. Now it's time to review the second step, conducting research. As a reminder, if you'd like a more in-depth introduction to these concepts, check out the course readings to find the original videos on conducting a usability study. Okay, let's get started. A usability study is a research method that assesses how easy it is for participants to complete core tasks in a product. During a usability study, researchers observe the participants to understand how they interact with the prototype of the product and complete tasks. Then, UX designers use the insights from the study to make improvements to their designs. There are two types of usability studies, moderated and unmoderated. In moderated usability studies, a person guides participants through the study in real time. The person who guides participants through the study is known as the moderator. The moderator's goal is to assign participants different tasks to complete within the product and watch participants interact with the product. Plus, they collect their feedback along the way. Moderated studies allow the moderator to ask specific questions, follow up in real time, and build a rapport with participants. On the other hand, in unmoderated usability studies, the participants test out the prototypes without a moderator present. Usually, the study is recorded on video, and the UX team reviews the video footage after the study. Since participants complete tasks on their own time and in their own space, it can be easier to get accurate feedback. Plus, they might feel more comfortable being honest when there isn't a moderator in the room. In this program, we've already conducted a usability study on our low-fidelity prototypes. Coming up, we'll do another usability study on our high-fidelity prototypes. So why conduct multiple usability studies? Because your product looks and functions differently at every stage. You can conduct as many usability studies as you need to make changes to your design and improve the user experience. And you can conduct usability studies at any point in the design process. Keep in mind that the later in the process you conduct a usability study, the more expensive it is to make changes because your design is farther along in the design process and more complex. One more thing. Determining the size of your study depends on the project, but around 5 participants is a good start. It's a large enough sample size to gather real data, but it's not so large that the study costs a lot of money or takes a long time. If you'd like to watch a usability study in action, check out the videos from the earlier course that are linked in the reading for this lesson. And that's it for the second step of a UX research study, conducting the research. It's time to review the next step, synthesize the research results. Let's go. Welcome back. We're making our way through the steps in a UX research study. So far, we've covered the first 2 steps, plan the study and conduct the research. Now, it's time to move to step 3 of a UX research study, analyze and synthesize the data you gathered during your usability study. Let's start our review. Now that you've carefully planned your UX research study and conducted the research with participants, you're ready to turn your observations from the research into actionable insights. Remember, an insight is an observation that helps you understand the user or their needs from a new perspective. Insights help explain what data means and what to do with it. In just 4 steps, we can turn the observations from our research into actionable insights. First, we gather all of the data from our usability study in one place. This includes every note and scribble you and the other observers took during the study. Second, we organize the data. How you organize it is up to you. 2 methods we explored were affinity diagramming and spreadsheet note-taking. Whatever method you choose, be consistent throughout the study. Third, we find themes in the data. One of the key goals of user research is to identify themes, or patterns, that are common across participants. Once you recognize the themes, it's easier to turn the feedback into something actionable. And finally, we create a list of insights based on the themes. Strong insights are grounded in real data and answer the research questions that were laid out in your plan. Insights should be easy to understand and increase empathy for the user experience. And the best insights inspire direct action and help the design team improve the product. Now that you have a list of insights from your usability study, you're ready to make improvements to your design. That's what we'll cover in the next video, iterating on your high-fidelity designs. Meet you there. Now that we've built our high-fidelity prototype and conducted another usability study, I'll show you how to make updates to your designs in Figma based on feedback from participants. Although iterating on a prototype is a possibility and reality for many teams, it's time and cost intensive. So as UX designers, we try to fix problems in our static mockups instead. In this video, I'll demonstrate how to make changes to mockups and the prototype using the Dog Walker app as an example. Our latest usability study had participants review the high-fidelity prototype of our Dog Walker app, and a couple of insights were uncovered about the usability of the app. I've chosen to address two of those insights, as they are critical to improving the user experience. The first insight that came out of our research was that participants were unable to easily select a date from a calendar. The second insight was that participants did not know the price per dog walker until the end of the scheduling flow. Okay, it's time to start making updates to my mockups in Figma. Let me pull them up on my computer now. I'll start by updating the date selection screen. Remember back when we did the first usability study? Users said that the open field to type the date and time was too difficult to use. To fix that problem, I added a new date picker in the form of a scrolling wheel. In the latest usability study on the high-fidelity prototype, users still weren't happy with the scheduling functionality. They found the wheel easier to use, but when they wanted to schedule far in the future, they were only given the month and date to choose from. There was no day option. So if a participant only wanted to schedule a dog walker on Mondays, they had to open a separate calendar to find the date that corresponds to each day of the week. To make the scheduling more user-friendly, I can add a calendar pop-up to the scheduling page instead. That way, when users choose a day for their dog to be walked, they can get all the information they need at the same time. So how do I make this happen in Figma? First, I'll make a copy of the scheduling pages to act as our new version. I'm going to place them below the current version so I can easily keep track of where they go in the user flow. In the screen on the left, which is screen 2 of the user flow, I'm going to remove the wheel with the day, time, and duration options. I'll replace that wheel with drop-down menus. I'm going to use a drop-down here so when the user taps the day field, a calendar pops up. I'm going to go back to my sticker sheet and copy the drop-down with less rounded corners for this. I created these earlier, but building them is fairly simple. There's a rectangle with a rounded edge, a text label, and a down arrow icon to indicate movement. The down arrow icon came from the material design library. Then, I'll paste the dropdown over here on my new screen, where I deleted the wheel. I need to update the text to say day. I also need to increase the width of the dropdown to fill most of the width of the screen. Now, when this button is clicked, the calendar will appear. I'll build the screen for that in a minute. I also need to create menus for the time and duration, so I'll make 2 more copies of this menu component. These time and duration dropdowns will be side by side and will each take up half of the width of the day dropdown. In order for these 2 dropdowns to fit into the design, I need to move other components lower on the page, like the recurring booking checkbox and list of dogs that need to go for a walk. Great! Screen 2 has now been updated. Next, let's figure out how to update screen 3 of our mockups. When a user presses the day button, the menu will expand and the calendar will be shown. Building out a calendar function in Figma can be pretty complicated. To create a calendar from scratch, I would need to draw the shapes, add all the numbers, and label the months and days for every month of the year. So this is the perfect opportunity to lean on a design system or the UX design community. Remember in an earlier video how I mentioned there are many ways to use design systems? Instead of drawing a calendar from scratch, I can insert a pre-made calendar that a big brand or another designer has already created. Using a pre-made component like this will save a lot of time. Thankfully, Figma has a community where you can explore other users' files and borrow components to reuse in your designs if they've made them publicly available. I'm going to navigate to figma.com/community. I made it. Now, I'll search for calendar templates. I like this one from Felipe, so I'm going to duplicate it. I'll paste the calendar from Felipe into the new screen, where the wheel was. But we're not done yet. This calendar is functional, but doesn't fit the design needs of the Dog Walker app. I need to change the colors, font, alignment, and spacing to make it perfect. This takes time, but it's worth the effort to make the calendar fully customized. And ta-da! Here's the finished calendar that I updated to match the style of the Dog Walker app. Next, I need to move the other dropdowns underneath. When the Day menu expands, the rest of the page under it will automatically be pushed down. Let's check out how this works in a prototype. I've already set it up for you, so let me switch over there. So, let's test it out. Perfect. It's working as intended. Okay, I've addressed the first insight that came out of the usability study. Participants were unable to easily select a date from a calendar. The Dog Walker app now has a full calendar that users can select a date from. It's time to update my designs based on the second insight that came out of our research. Participants did not know the price per dog walker until the end of the scheduling flow. I'll start by making this update on the homepage of the app. Like I did earlier, I'm going to make a copy of the homepage for this new iteration. Then, I'll add prices. I'm going to add the price that each dog walker charges to the line of information with the star rating and distance, since these all seem like equally important pieces of information for comparing dog walkers. To do this, I'll highlight the distance text and icon and copy and paste. Then, I'll drag my new text box and icon to the right until the spacing is even between the star rating, distance, and price. We already determined the price for Sarah to walk a dog for 30 minutes is $10, so we should assume her hourly rate is twice that, or $20. I'll update the text box here. Now I need an icon. The easiest way to find icons is to use an existing design library like Material, then edit it to fit the style of your designs. So that's what I'll do now. I'll find a dollar icon from Material and paste it. Now I'll change the color so it matches the rest of my designs. Perfect. Now I'll copy the amount and icon to each of the other dog walkers on the page. And I'll edit the numbers so they're all charging different amounts in the same price range. Great. As soon as the user opens the app, they'll be able to compare the price that each dog walker charges. I'll need to make the same updates to add pricing information on other pages of the Dog Walker app too, including the Browse page and the Dog Walker profile pages. For the sake of time, I won't demo this process again, but I'd repeat the same steps. Now that we've updated the mocks for certain pages of our app, we need to remove the pages we no longer want. I'm going to take the old versions of the pages and move them off my workspace. And I'll move my new mockups into the user flow. Let's test the whole prototype one more time. The user would enter the app on the homepage and click the Book Appointment button. Then, they'd move through the Book Appointment screens using our new calendar dropdown to select a date. As they continue through the rest of the user flow, there is increased transparency with the new pricing icons and text. Great! I now have a new and improved prototype. I made changes to my prototype based on feedback from the latest usability study. As a UX designer, you'll continually iterate to improve your work. You might be wondering, now what? Are we done? Do we have to do another usability study or a presentation to stakeholders? Great questions. I'll answer those coming up. But first, get to work on your own project. Make changes to your designs based on feedback you received during your usability study. Catch you later. Once you've built your prototype, tested your design, asked for a critique, implemented feedback, and iterated on your prototype, you might be wondering, how do I know when my design is actually finished? At some point, you'll have to stop making changes to your design and send it on to the engineering team to build. But finalizing your designs is a big decision. How do you know when you're ready? In this video, you'll learn when it's time to stop iterating on your designs and hand off your work for production. You might be tempted to call the iteration complete when your team runs out of certain resources, like time or money. Although resources are important to consider, time and money shouldn't be the deciding factor when it comes to making your designs the best they can be. There are 3 questions you can consider to determine if your designs are final. Ask yourself, are the designs a true representation of the intended user experience? Have placeholder text, icons, and imagery been replaced with finalized assets? And are participants or users able to interact with and interpret the designs without external guidance? If your team can answer these 3 questions with a resounding yes, then you've done it. You've finalized your designs, and it's time to hand off the designs to engineering for production. We'll discuss the logistics involved in the handoff process soon. For new designers especially, it can be scary to stop making changes and send your product out into the world. You could work endlessly on designs and still worry that your designs aren't providing value to users. But fear not. Most product designs require updates even after they've launched. Updates might happen a few weeks after your launch, or months in the future, depending on the size of the update and its importance. So even after a product is out in the world, it's never really done. The more experience you gain in UX design, the more comfortable you'll be making the decision to stop iterating. Coming up, you'll learn how to collaborate with engineers to hand off your designs in Figma. You've just finished your first high-fidelity prototype. Congratulations, it's a huge accomplishment. Now comes the part where you share your designs with others, one of the most important parts of your work. In the real world, that would mean handing off your designs to developers and engineers. Basically, you provide all the mockups, prototypes, specs, and the design system, and the engineering team starts the coding process. As a student in this program, you don't have an engineering team at the ready, so there won't be anyone to produce your design. But you do need to share what you've learned with others. In this case, it's hiring managers and recruiters. That's right. It's time to update your portfolio by building your first case study. Coming up, I'm going to take you through both processes. Either way, you'll be showing off your work, so get ready. You've just finished your first high-fidelity prototype. Luckily for you, most of the specs engineers will need are already included as part of your designs in Figma. Keep in mind, you may need to document and share a few additional specs on edge cases and accessibility considerations. The handoff process you'll follow depends on your company's size and type, so we'll go over a few common scenarios. At a design agency or small business, the handoff process might be similar to a relay race. If you're not familiar, a relay race is a type of running race that involves a team. One person sprints a section of the race, then passes a baton to the next person, who then starts running their section of the race. Similarly, in this method of design production, UX designers finalize every aspect of their designs before handing them off to the next team, which is engineering. At that point, the UX designers are no longer intensely involved in the project, so they can move on to something new. Alternatively, at larger companies like Google, the design team and the engineers often work closely together throughout the development process. The designs might be mostly done, but still need some tweaks when they're handed off to the engineers. In a more collaborative environment, the engineers might be able to start working on one aspect of the design, like the user profile page or the shopping cart feature, while the designers continue working on something unrelated, like the homepage or a navigation bar. Keep in mind, working simultaneously can make a project move more quickly, but might create a need to redo something twice. All in all, there's no right way to hand off designs to production, but there are plenty of options your team can try. As an entry-level UX designer, you won't be responsible for deciding how the handoff process works, but you will be involved. So it's important to build strong relationships with members of your cross-functional team to help the handoff process go smoothly. The technical logistics of the design handoff process matter too. Coming up, you'll get to experience this process in more detail through a video provided by Figma. They'll demonstrate how to collaborate in Figma so each team member has the right information in place to move forward with their task. This will be a really useful tool for you in the future.
Design is a collaborative process that involves stakeholders and collaborators across your company. PMs can use Figma for brainstorming or to give feedback through comments. Writers can leave suggestions for copy or edit it directly. Researchers and designers can share and test prototypes. And developers can inspect properties, copy code, and export assets. In this Figma for Beginners series, we've demystified this process by following the evolution of a mobile app from initial wireframes to an interactive prototype. Sharing early and often encourages collaboration with the right people at the right time. There are a few things we can do to set up our files and make this a seamless process. With the growing popularity of open design, members of your team might view and contribute to files at any point in time. To help orient people to our files, we can create custom thumbnails. This frame has the thumbnail dimensions of 1920 by 960. Anything within the 1600 pixel safe area in the center of our frame is always visible in the file browser. We can include information like the current status of a file, an image or illustration of the file's contents, information about our team, and hyperlinks to pages, frames, or external documentation like specifications and requirements. Right-click on the frame and choose Set as Thumbnail. Now, when your team members see your file in the file browser or open it in the editor, they can easily see that information. When and how you invite your teammates to your file may vary. Invite developers early to give feedback on the viability of your explorations, or near the end of the process when you're ready to hand off designs for production. You can invite collaborators to your files with edit or view access. Viewers can still comment on files and prototypes and export static assets. They're also free. You can even embed files and prototypes in other websites, like your product management tools or design system documentation. To find out more, visit the Figma Help Center and search Embed. If you join the file as a viewer, Figma will look a little different. The simplified toolbar gives us access to the Move tool to select layers, the Comment tool to leave comments, and the Hand tool to pan around the canvas. Viewers can also access Presentation View to preview frames and interact with prototypes, as well as other settings like toggling layout grids, rulers, or pixel preview. Instead of the design and prototype panels in the right side bar, we have access to the Inspect and Export panels. When we select objects on the canvas, the Inspect tab displays the names of the selected layer, read-only properties, and code snippets for that object. Click Copy next to a property to add code snippets to your clipboard. If a component is using styles, Figma will display the style name in the corresponding field. This is useful if you want to use semantic naming that matches your production code. If you've added descriptions to your component or links to documentation, you can see them in the Inspect panel when you select an instance. Viewers can also export assets. As a developer, we want to export these icons for development. We can select the icon, go to the Export tab, and click the plus icon to add a new export setting. Figma will create a default export setting of 1x PNG. Your designs aren't set to a specific resolution. You can change the size of the export using the multiplier. If you want to export assets at multiple resolutions, you can add another export setting. You can also change the export format. Figma supports exports in PNG, PDF, JPEG, and SVG. We'll change this to SVG and click Export to download a copy of this icon. If you want to share files with viewers, but prevent them from copying frames from the canvas or using Figma's export function, you can disable the setting in the Share modal. To learn more, search Exports in the Figma Help Center. Congratulations! You reached the end of the Figma for Beginners tutorial series. We've covered a lot of topics during this video series, and there's no shortage of features to explore. The best way to improve at using Figma is to get in there and play. For more inspiration of how others are using Figma, check out the Figma community. If you get stuck, click the question mark in the bottom right corner of Figma to access our Help Center and video tutorials.
Because of all the hard work you've put in throughout this program, you now have 2 designs that you can showcase in your portfolio. You'll create a case study to show off each of these projects. A case study is a summarized presentation of a design project that typically includes the project goal and objectives, your role in the project, the process your team followed, and the outcome of the project. You might be wondering, why are case studies so important? Case studies are a visible demonstration of your design knowledge, your willingness to collaborate with the team, and your ability to see an idea through from start to finish, despite challenges. When a recruiter or hiring manager is considering you for a job, they'll want to find case studies within your portfolio. Each design project you complete will have its own case study. Case studies should be presented in a concise and engaging way. Your case study needs to tell recruiters exactly what they need to know as quickly and efficiently as possible. Your case studies need to be visually appealing and easy to skim. Let's explore a real case study that was created by Josh, an interaction designer here at Google. You'll notice that Josh's portfolio features several case studies. Let's check this one out. In this project, Josh and 2 others designed an app called Mech Market that allows you to buy, sell, or share mechanical keyboard parts and products. First, Josh included a project title and a hero image. A hero image is a large banner at the top of a website. It really catches your attention and provides a glimpse into the type of product that's being presented. Plus, it's a great spot to really flex any visual design skills you have. Next, and this is important, Josh included his role on the project. He was in charge of conducting the research and led the team on creating visuals. For this certificate program, you've been working on all aspects of the design process. It's great to call that out in your own case study. In your future job, you might work on a cross-functional team where every person has a task to accomplish. If that's the case, be sure to explain your specific role within the project as part of your case study. Next, Josh summarized the Mech Market project. He clearly listed the problems this project addressed in a numbered format at the top of the case study. He chose to label this section Challenges. When you build this part of your own case study, ask yourself, what was the goal or vision from my project? And what was the problem my design addressed? Placing the list of user problems that your design addressed at the start of your case study gives the reader more context. Then, Josh described all of the research he conducted. Pro tip, you can't include all the details of your research in a case study. The goal is to display key insights from your research activities, instead of presenting the artifacts like a checklist you completed. As a hiring manager, it's more important for me to know that you gained insights from your research than it is to show you can make an affinity diagram. So let's check out what Josh did to describe his research. Josh starts by listing the research questions his project explored. Next, Josh included some information about the research he conducted, like a photo of his affinity diagram and insights from that research activity. He also included a few personas, which he named Jake, Blair, and Wayne. The final piece of research that Josh included was a summary of the findings from his competitive analysis. Next, Josh included a simple overview of the app's information architecture. Okay, you might be noticing that Josh's case study follows the order of the design process that we've also followed in this certificate program. He started with research, which helped him empathize with users and define the problem, which are the first 2 steps of the design process. Now, he transitions to the 3rd and 4th steps of the design process, ideate and prototype. Check this out. Here, Josh included a photograph of some of his paper wireframes. Remember, you don't want to overwhelm readers by showing a bunch of messy sketches and wireframes. Instead, you want to show recruiters that you follow the proper steps with clear images of your work like this. Does this next image look familiar? Here, Josh showed his low-fidelity prototypes. These might look similar to the low-fidelity prototypes you created earlier in the program. Then, Josh discussed how his team iterated on their designs based on feedback from a usability study. In your portfolio case study, be sure to include insights from the usability studies you've conducted too. To bring his work full circle, Josh described how his product's design addresses each of the 4 problems or challenges that he listed in a numbered format at the start of the case study. After that, Josh included his style guide, which we've called the sticker sheet. You just created a sticker sheet in this course, so you can now see where that fits into the case study. Josh included images of his final designs, like these. Notice that he has a carousel to show multiple images of the designs. In your case studies, you can include images of your final mockups or GIFs of your final prototypes for the projects you're creating as part of the certificate program. Last but not least, Josh added a short written description about his key takeaways from the project. This is a great way for you to wrap up your case studies as well. When you do design projects with real clients, you might also include data like the number of downloads or signups your app has in the takeaways section. Make sure you describe all that you've learned during the design process. You want to show that you can reflect on your work and analyze it critically. Maybe something surprised you about where the project ended up, or you have a list of things you do differently next time. These are all valuable insights to share. One more pro tip. If you want to share lots of details about your project, you can use a button that links to another resource, like a slide deck, PDF, or another page on the website. In Josh's case study, he links to his project's process deck at the top and bottom of the case study. The main thing to keep in mind when creating your case study is that you want to tell a cohesive story. One way to tell a story is to follow the 5 steps of the design process. Overall, the goal of your case study is to tell the story of how you improved the user's experience through your design. When you have a strong draft of a case study in your portfolio, share it with a few friends and family members, or in an online UX design community to get feedback. Think of this as a crit session for your portfolio. And that's it. You know what a case study in a UX design portfolio needs to include. Now it's your turn to add case studies to your portfolio to showcase your work. Have fun! Hi there. Let's do a quick review of everything you've accomplished in this part of the course. To start, you conducted a usability study on your high-fidelity prototype to get real feedback. Then, you iterated on your designs one last time to address the insights from the usability study. You learned a few tips for how to know when you're done with the design process. And lastly, you learned how to hand off designs to engineers for production. You've learned valuable job preparation skills too, including how to showcase your work in a case study. You're almost done with this entire course. One more assessment left. Good luck!